Good morning, citizens of the UW system. Welcome to this November meeting of the UW System Board of Regents. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Regent President Walsh,
Here.
Regent Vice President Bogus, Regent Adams, Regent Atwell, Regent Bechtel,
Here.
Regent Cologne, Regent Jones, Regent Menendez,
Here.
Regent Miller,
Here.
Regent Posh,
Here.
Regent Peterson,
Here.
Regent Rye,
Here.
Regent Staton, here, Regent Tucker, here, Regent Underly, here, Regent Walks,
Here.
Regent Weatherly.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Megan. As we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members who wish to declare any conflicts of interest regarding today's open session agenda? I'm raising my hand because to avoid a conflict of interest, I will be recusing myself from Business and Finance item E. Are there any other recusals today? Okay, seeing no other ones, the records of the September 29 and 30, 2022 regular meeting of the UW System Board of Regents have been provided. May I have a motion to approve those records? Thank you. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Before we get started, I would first like to congratulate the winners of Tuesday's elections, those who are returning to office and those who are newly elected. We look forward to reaching out to elected officials from both sides of the political aisle and keeping open lines of communication with new and experienced lawmakers alike. I'd also like to recognize the folks who didn't win on Tuesday but were willing to serve this state. They also deserve our thanks. These are, of course, complex times. Our relationships with lawmakers at the federal and state level have never been more important, and we're fortunate to have an excellent team dedicated to that. Again, congratulations on your election victories, and thank you to those who did not win but were willing to serve. To open my president's report, I'd like to first note that this is First Generation Student Week, and I know this thanks to our colleagues at UW Parkside. I learned this morning that we have right now in the UW system about 8,400 first-generation college students. And that number has been steadily declining, Mr. Passmore tells me, over the last 10 years. And that's a number we'd very much like to see go up. And here's why I'd like to see it go up. Right now, I'd like to ask everybody in the room who is a first-generation college graduate to stand up. Thank you all. And I know that all the folks that work with our students in the system know how important it is to mentor and focus on student success of our first generation students. We're all out there and they are truly among our future leaders. So a brief update on our two chancellor searches. First, UW Whitewater Chancellor Search and Screen Committee, chaired by Regent Vice President Bogus, recently interviewed semifinalists and forwarded its recommendations to the Special Regent Committee. They'll meet later this month to confirm the candidates will be invited to visit the campus as finalists early in December, sorry. The Special Regent Committee is expected to interview the finalists in January. Now an update on the UW Platteville Chancellor search process that is chaired by our Regent colleague, Chris Peterson. The committee had its first meeting last month and has since held a series of listening sessions at all three of UW Platteville's campuses. Chris, what are you up to now in numbers of listening sessions? Yes, she is taking this job very seriously, and we sure thank her for that. Last week, the Search and Screen Committee met to review the position prospectus, which was then approved by the Special Regent Committee. The search officially opens tomorrow, and the deadline for assured consideration of applications is January 17th. And as former chair of a variety of searches, I would ask if there are any of you who know good candidates for that position, please forward them to Regent Peterson. Selecting new leaders for our universities is one of the most important responsibilities that we have as a board. I'm proud of how we have fulfilled these duties over the past several years. In recent months, We celebrated the inauguration, installation, investiture, pick your term of choice, for 3 of our chancellors, Chancellor Tom Gibson of UW-Stevens Point, Chancellor Catherine Frank of UW-Stout, and Chancellor Maria Gallo of River Falls. Each of these leaders stepped into their new roles in a time of considerable anxiety and uncertainty, more than usual, as the COVID-19 pandemic seemingly turned everything upside down. And they, like all of our chancellors, really rose to the occasion. We thank you for that. I'm delighted that, albeit belatedly, we were finally able to officially celebrate their new roles. I know many of us had the opportunity to attend these special events, and it's always wonderful to see what a vibrant role our universities play in their respective communities. Finally, in recognition of Veterans Day tomorrow, we thank all those who wear, have worn, or will wear the uniform in service of our country. We have deep respect and gratitude for those who serve, both on and off the battlefield, and those who steadfastly stand on guard to ensure our freedom, our security, and our cherished way of life. Could I ask any veterans in the room to please stand and be recognized? Very good. Again, thank you for your service. And later this morning, we will have a panel discussion, including our colleague and U.S. Army veteran Regent Jennifer Staton, about how the UW system serves our current, past, and future military students. That concludes my report. Over to you, President Rothman.
Great. Thank you very much, President Walsh, and good morning, everyone. I too would like to thank our veterans very sincerely for stepping up to serve our country. There is no higher purpose or honor. I think I speak on behalf of so many fellow Americans to say we commend and appreciate your extraordinary commitment, drive, and patriotism. We particularly recognize those who made the ultimate sacrifice in support of our freedom. We are indebted to all of our veterans and their families who have given so very much. I have a quick update on the UW Systems campaign to encourage students to complete the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. This campaign, which was launched on October 1st, is the first step for students to gain, among other financial aid, access to the Wisconsin Tuition Promise, a UW system program that starts in the fall of 2023 and is consistent with Bucky's Tuition Promise to help more underserved students obtain a degree on a tuition-free basis at a UW university. We've been spreading the word about the importance of completing FAFSA in a variety of ways, including ads on social media sites such as Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and TikTok, with informational links directing students and parents to a new UW Help website dedicated to FAFSA. I'm pleased to report that the early results are impressive. As of last week, we had more than 9,000 clicks on our FAFSA website, all of which occurred during the first month of the campaign. And starting last week, we're now expanding the campaign to include streaming radio and podcast ads on Spotify and Pandora, with additional plans for a radio spot on Wisconsin radio stations for 5 weeks starting in mid-December. There's a real need in our state for this campaign. The National College Attainment Network currently ranks Wisconsin 38th with respect to FAFSA completion, with only 50% of our high school students, seniors from the class of 2021, completing the form. As we'll talk more about this issue later this morning in my update on the strategic planning process, I hope we all recognize the urgent need to help provide Wisconsin businesses and employers with the talent they need to win the war for talent, which is so vital to our state's long-term economic prosperity. Our ability within the system to enroll and graduate more people is a critical element to support our state's economy. The FAFSA campaign is just one component of our expanding effort to provide access to higher education and the opportunities that come with it to a broader swath of our population. Education is a great equalizer and changes the trajectory of people's lives. Completion of the FAFSA is an important first step in that journey. Our FAFSA campaign will run through February of 2023. Now, a couple of other updates. I'd like to call your attention to the award ceremony that is taking place later this afternoon. The UW system will be recognizing the 13 recipients of the 2022 Outstanding Women of Color in Education Award, an annual honor given to faculty, staff, students, and community members in recognition of their achievements in advancing equity and inclusion for people of color within the UW system, as well as communities across the state. This year is the 27th anniversary of the award, through which more than 400 women of color have been recognized over the years for their transformational work. At the same celebration, we will also be honoring the 12 recipients of the 2022 PB Porman Award for outstanding achievement on behalf of LGBTQ+ people, an annual honor given to recognize those who have helped to create a safer and more inclusive climate for LGBT+ people. The award celebrates the memory and legacy of Dr. Paula B. Porman, a highly regarded faculty member at UW Whitewater, who was dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ+ people. This year marks the 14th anniversary of the founding of this award. When we talk about the UW system, and more importantly, the 13 universities that comprise the system, and people being focused on providing a university experience that is welcoming and supportive for all, this is part of what we mean. I congratulate all of the winners for their contribution in helping to make the UW a better place. And I invite you to either attend the ceremony or check out our website to find out more about the award winners. Finally, I'm pleased to recognize several significant recent accomplishments in the UW system family. We've been talking a lot about helping to meet the demand for talent by employers in the state. I'm pleased to note that the Wisconsin Forestry Center at UW Stevens Point will receive a state workforce innovation grant of up to $8 million to help address the need for skilled workers in the forestry industry. The grant funds a forest industry workforce recruitment and development initiative to be led by the university's Wisconsin Forestry Center in collaboration with industry, education, and economic development partners across the state. It is the largest state grant awarded to UW Stevens Point in recent history. UW Stevens Point has the largest undergraduate forestry program in the nation. According to Ben Sloss, Dean of the university's College of Natural Resources, the program provides a significant number of traditional four-year skilled professionals, but the state's industry simply needs more. The program is a direct response to that need. The logging and forest products sector is among the top 10 employers in 31 counties in Wisconsin and is number 1 in 10 of those counties. Congratulations to Chancellor Tom Gibson and the entire Pointer community. Enhancing the state experience and supporting student success are among our top priorities, and the unwavering commitment of all of our universities to these principles was one of the most striking things I encountered on my campus tours over the summer. That is really reassuring when you see that commitment. UW Superior recently learned that it has been awarded a $2 million Department of Education Title III Strengthening Institutions grant specifically to support that type of work. The grant is one of the most competitive offered by the federal agency, and the funds will be spread over 5 years to support new advising initiatives designed to increase student retention and graduation rates at our northernmost university. UW Superior will use the funds to provide professional development for faculty and staff to implement best practices related to advising and student success, as well as to implement fully the software platform Navigate. As Chancellor Wachter, when she talked to us at our last meeting, closing the opportunity gaps once students come to campus is one of the most complicated situations universities face, and this will help get it done. Well done, Renee, and my congratulations to you and the entire Superior community. On a related note, UW Stout was recently chosen by the State Council on Affirmative Action as its winner of the 2022 Ann Leidecker Educational Diversity Award for the Stout Word Bound program. Stout Word Bound is a learning and living community for Stout's first-year ethnic minority students and is designed to provide students with a jump start to college. Participants in the program meet with a Stout Word Bound advisor and peer mentors for one-on-one mentoring and connections to campus resources. Students are also given opportunities for personal growth with workshops, community activities, and leadership development. In making the award, the council said it was impressed with the intentional design and continuous improvement to the program and its outcomes, including high post-graduation employment rates for students from underrepresented backgrounds. Congratulations to Chancellor Frank and the entire UW Stout community. UW Falls Chancellor Maria Gallo has been named the 2022 recipient of the NASPA Region 4 East President's Award. NASPA, which stands for the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, presents this honor to a college or university president or chancellor who has, over a sustained period of time, advanced the quality of student life on campus by supporting student affairs staff and initiatives. NASPA is the leading national association for the advancement, health, and sustainability of the student affairs profession, with more than 15,000 members representing 2,100 institutions. As a Region 4 East winner, Chancellor Gallo will now be forwarded for consideration for the National President's Award, one of NASPA's top honors. Congratulations, Maria, and to the entire UW River Falls community. Doing our part to bolster economic opportunity in the state, UW Oshkosh's biogas program recently announced it has partnered with Agra Energy of Irvine, California, to break ground on Wisconsin's first commercial facility to turn dairy farm waste into renewable biofuel. The $20 million facility, located at Dairyland Farm in New Franken, will use pioneering technology to convert biogas waste into an estimated 750,000 gallons of renewable diesel and jet fuel annually. Think about that next time you get on a plane. Groundbreaking for this project took place in mid-October. UW Oshkosh has been building a relationship with startup Agra Energy since 2017 and began to demonstrate the new gas to liquid conversion technology at the small-scale Allen Farm digester in northwestern Winnebago County. This new project not only expands UW Oshkosh's research interests in sustainability, but it also provides additional hands-on experience for students to learn about biogas systems. Congratulations, Chancellor Levitt and UW Oshkosh. Finally, I am delighted to salute Dr. Monica Kim, a UW-Madison historian, for being awarded a 2022 MacArthur Fellowship. This highly prestigious award, also known as a Genius Grant, recognizes recipients for their exceptional creativity, future promise, and potential for the fellowship to advance their work. The grant provides an $800,000 stipend to be used as the MacArthur Fellow sees fit. In her work, Dr. Kim analyzes the wars of intervention undertaken by the U.S. during the Cold War, in particular the Korean War. By examining the experiences of ordinary people caught in the machinery of war, she creates new narratives that can sometimes add complexity and new layers of perspective to the official top-down versions of the conflict. Her interests have roots that are literally close to home. Her Korean parents emigrated to the U.S. because of the Korean War. I would also like to point out that three others who received MacArthur Fellowships this year have ties to UW-Madison, 2 alumni as well as a former faculty member. So it was a really good year for UW-Madison. Congratulations to Dr. Kim, Chancellor Mnuchin, and the entire UW-Madison campus community. That's all the good news I have, but it's an impressive list of accomplishments by our team. So thank you all. And that concludes my report. And back to you, President Walsh.
Thank you, President Rothman. Next, we'll be considering how higher education institutions can better serve and accommodate students from various religious backgrounds as part of our continuing commitment to providing an inclusive and welcoming university environment for people to live, work, and study. Here to lead off our discussion today, Mark Rotenberg, Vice President of University Initiatives and Legal Affairs for Hillel International, and Greg Steinberger, President and CEO of UW Hillel. Hillel International is the largest Jewish student organization in the world, with more than 550 colleges and universities among its members. UW Hillel at UW-Madison was founded in 1924 as the second such foundation in the country. According to Hillel International, UW-Madison has the sixth largest Jewish student population among public universities, with about 4,200 Jewish undergraduates at the campus, representing more than 10% of the total student population. Please join me in welcoming our guests, Mark Rotenberg and Grace Steinberger, and I'll ask them to join us at the table.
Well, good morning. President Walsh, President Rothman, members of the board. My name is Mark Rotenberg. I'm the Vice President for University Initiatives and Legal Affairs for Hill International in Washington, D.C. My colleague, Greg Steinberger, is with us here today representing UW-Hillel. I'd like to just begin with a couple of observations about the centenary that President Walsh just mentioned. Hill International was founded in the Big Ten Conference down a ways at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 1923. And Hillel at Madison, at UW-Madison, was the second Hillel here in 1924. Since that time, Hillel has founded over 550 campus Hillels around the world, most of which are in North America. As I said, we have boots on the ground and bricks and mortar on hundreds upon hundreds of campuses. But it's worthy of this occasion here at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, to reflect on that centenary and how far we've come. Back in those days, as many of you know, anti-Semitism was rampant in higher education as it was across the world. And this was not a secret thing. This was not a private thing. The president of Harvard University was quoted on the front page of the New York Times in the 1920s, saying that it was a good thing for Jews to be limited in higher education, to have quotas against them, because it would help reduce anti-Semitism. And so in those days, the Jewish community learned to do it yourself, if you will. There were no DEI programs, there were no DEI directors or officers. And so Hillel was founded in a time when Jewish students needed a place to express themselves, to express their Jewish identities and express their need for kosher food, for celebrating the Sabbath, for religious holiday observances, because universities at that time were not hospitable. Over the last 100 years, of course, the Jewish community in America has come a very, very long way. And for decades, from about the 1960s until the 2000s, anti-Semitism in American higher education was really negligible. Hillel International didn't even count the number of anti-Semitic incidents in colleges and universities until 2013. And since that time, the situation has become dramatically different. What I want to say, though, before we go into it, we have a short slide deck to offer you here this morning, is that Hillel's role here is now no longer what it was in the 1920s. As President Walsh said, almost 100 years ago, when it was founded here at UW-Madison. We're not trying to be separate and apart. Need to be separate and apart. The mission of Hillel is to be part of the university's commitment to diversity, equity, justice, and equality, to be included within the university's commitment to fairness for all minoritized populations, because the Jewish community, having been persecuted and expelled from almost every country on earth at one point or another, understands that when equality and justice is not provided for one group, it will not be provided for any other group. So we've come a long way since the 1920s. We're proud that the University of Wisconsin will be celebrating its 100th anniversary as one of the founding members of a 500 plus member organization now. But our mission has dramatically shifted because we know that universities like Wisconsin are committed to justice, equity, and inclusion, and Hillel wants to be part of that agenda. Next slide. Oh. There we go. Thank you. Megan's been helping me all the way through this. Just a couple words about who are Jewish students. There are many stereotypes about Jews in America, but it helps to understand that the Jewish people are ethnically, racially, socioeconomically a very diverse population. At the present time, 15% of the Jewish community identifies as Jews of color. 14% of Jews in America have household incomes under $30,000. 1/3 of the Jewish community in the United States identify as Jews of no religion. And this is important to understand because many people, I grew up in Minnesota, I was born and raised in Minneapolis. The largest Lutheran church was just down the street, Mount Olivet Lutheran Church. Parishioners would park in my driveway every Sunday morning. People imagine that the Jewish students today in 2022 identify as people of faith. And there are many, many Jewish students who do identify as people of faith. But if you ask Greg, how many people who come across the transom at UW-Madison Hillel can identify Maimonides' 13 Articles of Faith, they're probably under a few percent. Most of the Jewish students who come to Hillel today at Madison and across the United States identify as part of an ethno-religious community. They enjoy celebrating a Sabbath meal on Friday evening. They enjoy going to their parents' homes for the Passover. They enjoy having a Hanukkah party or dressing up for a Purim celebration or going to visit their relatives in Israel. These are not specifically religious identifications, but they're part of a broader cultural identification, which is often felt very strongly. So that last statistic there, about 1/3 of our students identify as Jews with no religion, needs to be kept in mind. Let's turn briefly to some of the worrisome trends that I mentioned a moment ago. You'll see on the slide here, the good news is that 2/3 of our students across the United States, according to a Hillel ADL survey that was conducted last year, 67% of our students agree that their college campus is welcoming and supportive of Jewish students. And that's a very hopeful, important statistic. On the other hand, 43% of our Jewish students have witnessed or experienced campus anti-Semitism in the past year alone. That's close to half of all students in this country who identify as Jews have seen some kind of discrimination personally, not just heard about it. They've witnessed or personally experienced it themselves. And even more worrisome is that 41% of our students have no idea how to report an anti-Semitic incident when it occurs. And this, ladies and gentlemen, really is our responsibility. I say this as a former general counsel of the University of Minnesota for almost 20 years, friendly competitors across the St. Croix, right? Big Ten universities and universities and colleges across the United States need to own the responsibility for helping students who experience anti-Semitism or any other kind of bias to know how to report it. And equally important, the universities need to understand what to do about it. A couple more slides on the stats. You'll see there that anti-Semitic incidents on U.S. campuses has risen dramatically. I mentioned that Hillel didn't even record them until 2013. That year, there were 27 reported incidents of anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses. You'll see the statistics on the left hand chart. In the past 2 academic years, the number of incidents has skyrocketed to well over 200. On the right hand, you'll see the numbers during the 2021 academic year. That chart is designed to show the close correlation between anti-Israel activity on a campus and anti-Semitism on the campus. Hillel International does not assume and does not record every anti-Israel protest or activity as being anti-Semitic, right? If there's a die-in or a BDS rally on a college campus, Hillel does not assume that that is anti-Semitic. It may be deeply erroneous. It may violate other principles of academic freedom and so on and so forth. But we don't assume that every anti-Israel activity on a campus is anti-Semitic. But it blinkers reality to say that they are not closely related to one another. And the chart on the right side illustrates that. Here in the state of Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Jewish Federation has done an annual audit of anti-Semitism, and their audit shows a 459% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the state of Wisconsin between 2015 and 2021, including increases in COVID-19 pandemic conspiracies and comparisons to the Holocaust and to Nazi persecution of Jews in the 1930s and 40s, rampant social media activity that targets the Jewish community in Wisconsin, overt acts of harassment, threats, and physical assaults on Jews in this state, and anti-Semitic references to Israel and or Zionism. And I'll just pause there for a moment to, again, make the point that while criticism or even very over-the-top condemnation of the government or the national security policies of the state of Israel are not anti-Semitic in Hillel International's view, there is a very close correlation between the kinds of condemnation of Israel and Zionism that bleed into classic anti-Semitic tropes, right? Depicting Israeli leaders with hooked noses or horns, dressing Israeli soldiers in Nazi uniforms, and so on and so forth. These are classic anti-Semitic tropes which land on Jewish students, not as criticisms of Israeli government policy, but as condemnations of their own identity. And this kind of dramatic 4.5-fold increase in anti-Semitism in the state of Wisconsin is, of course, only part of a much broader national and international spike in this phenomenon that the Jewish community has been experiencing in the EU, in the Middle East, in Central South America, and of course in the United States. And 2020, sadly, saw a record high number of anti-Semitic incidents in the state of Wisconsin. I'll turn it over here to my colleague, Greg, who can describe a little bit about the incidents that have occurred here at the University of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. So as Mark indicated, and as the slide shows, the public school, at least the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the Jewish community is quite large, almost 5,000 undergraduate, graduate, and postdoc students. We have other populations within the state in UW school systems, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Eau Claire, Whitewater have all had from time to time various sizes of Jewish groups. The other Hillel in the state is at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and it serves several schools, private schools within the Milwaukee community. But by far, in terms of population and long history, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Jewish students have been here for over 100 years. So we've had a series of kind of incidents in just recent moments, and I don't mean to really highlight the negative of them, but just to point out the kinds of experiences we've had, and I'll add some others. The first on the slide is talking about, as I'm sure many of you saw in the news, shocking at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, that targeted several communities of identity. Excuse me. Although it had come on the heels of Kanye West making the statement that DEFCON 3, he's going to go DEFCON 3 on the Jewish community. So that is an articulation that is no longer hidden in quiet conversation or in small pockets of our society, but is very public, which is part of what we are seeing nationwide, that sentiments that may or may not have existed forever in small communities have been normalized in really all facets of our society. In the campus, perhaps as a place that once showed these things more than others, is now showing them, thank you very much, are showing them in a much stronger and bolder way. University of Wisconsin-Madison on its first day of classes had chalking across campus, 7, 8 locations. My staff, students, and faculty reported it in because we had teams handing out bagels on Bascom, which is a welcome to campus. They hand out bagels as people are walking up the hill. Not all of those statements in and of themselves would be anti-Semitic, right? They fall within the political conversation. Well, we don't know the intent of the author, but we would define them as falling in that category. But some of them played into anti-Semitic tropes. The Jews, by way of calling them Zionists, have blood on their hands, and that organizations like Hillel and Chabad, which are organizations serving the plurality of Jewish life, from Jews who don't believe in religion to Jews who are deeply religious or secular and ethnic in their identity, have blood on their hands. So this was a particularly jarring and unwelcoming in the sense of belonging entry to the campus. We've also had other experiences that are adjacent to the campus that I would want to mention, and these things have happened across the state. Jews being responsible on posters and flyers that were paid for and put out regularly and monthly, saying that we were responsible for COVID or for the war in Ukraine. Stickers that have showed up on public trash cans, often affiliated with alt-right organizations globally that have called for Jews out of Wisconsin. So at the homecoming football game within Madison, not on campus, stickers were found on several recycling bins and garbage cans of the city that said Jews out of Wisconsin. So this is a constant and regular thing. I can tell you since September 1, or let's say August 15th, as people arrived on college campuses in Wisconsin, a week doesn't go by where we hear about these things. Often not fully reported, but reported by way of a phone call or a conversation with a friend or through faculty and staff. We've had incidents of social media bullying, of students who have been asked as they meet their roommates where their horns are, which is a longstanding trope against Jews. I remember it in my days in college, but I can tell you I've met students who've had that experience this year. Those might fall into what we would consider microaggressions, but nonetheless, for a community that feels assaulted in many ways globally, these have strong feelings and certainly emotional responses. I'll say just one more thing, that we also see this play out in other ways that fall into that, a sort of a misunderstanding of what it means to want to celebrate your identity. So it falls in two categories. One is these things have led Jewish students to say, I don't publicly feel comfortable wearing a Star of David around my neck, being in a photograph at a Jewish event in or outside of Hillel that could be on the internet, speaking to a reporter or even a bias officer on a campus. There's a question about their faith in action and what can be done in the grayness sometimes of discriminatory remarks. The other part that's happened, I've said to our students, You don't have to do things in the doors of our beautiful building. We've built this building as part of our 100-year history and the need to take care of ourselves. So when I've suggested that they run Jewish identity programs in public spaces on the campuses, they come back with a fear of doing that as well. That at least in our building, which has been picketed or protested or defiled with spray paint on the outside of the building, that they know it's our space. And when I've suggested if you do it in a public space in the university where some of the authority and responsibility now falls to the university to take care of you, they intellectually understand it and they emotionally can't bring themselves to do it. So that's to say that under the surface of their presenting as part of a warm and intense part of the campus community, that they really worry for what the impact is on them to do Jewish things, and I mean that in an ethnic, in social sense, in public spaces.
Thank you, Greg. I'd like to turn to what we can do about it, right? What's a positive response to all of this? One of the most important things that the University of Wisconsin system and the UW-Madison campus have committed to is participation in Hill International's Campus Climate Initiative. The initiative was set up 3 years ago. I'm responsible for it nationally. Is a program that now includes over 40 universities across the United States, across 3 cohorts which have been admitted into the program. What does the program involve? We're not helicopter parents. We don't fly in for a couple hours and then wish you the best for the rest of the year. As I said, we are bricks and mortar personnel on the ground. And what we are encouraging universities to do is to commit to 3 buckets of engagement with the initiative. First is rigorous assessment, right? Comprehensive reviews of university climate using data from surveys, from focus groups, an evaluation of your university policies, interviews with students and faculty and administrators. We have a contract with NORC, which is the University of Chicago's social science research arm, to provide this data. And as institutions committed to higher learning, while anecdotes are compelling and the stories of your own students' experiences, as Greg said, being reluctant to do anything Jewish in a public building at the University of Wisconsin is important data. You're also entitled to know statistically what is the climate, and that's an elusive exercise. But we commit to work with you to provide that information so you'll have a baseline. Number 2, we offer a whole curriculum of 16 months of learning, education, and training for your DEI supervisors, directors, and other student-facing administration. And this 3-semester experience offers an opportunity for University of Wisconsin leaders to gather together in cohorts with universities across the United States, University of Illinois, University of Texas, University of Florida, to learn together about the phenomenon and the spike in campus anti-Semitism and in anti-Semitism worldwide over the past several years. And finally, action, right? We're about improving the way universities go about handling these difficult and challenging issues. And so we have developed, again, a robust set of action tools that universities have and can adapt to their own particular needs. Here at the University of Wisconsin, the CCI team, the campus climate team, and Greg have met together with senior student affairs officers across the system and have been actively engaging in this work. And I am honored to say that Greg and I have had the opportunity to meet several times with President Rothman to discuss the importance of working in this area and getting better. And finally, I want to note, President Rothman this week adopted amendments to the UW Systems Administrative Policy 165 on the academic calendar to address the issues related to that arose in the context of scheduling the first day of class on Rosh Hashanah last 2 years ago. These efforts by the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the University of Wisconsin system are to be applauded, and they represent an important demonstration of commitment by this institution to tackle these problems in an explicit and open way, not to be embarrassed by it. This is not singling out any particular university across the United States, but to frankly attempt in meaningful ways to address the serious problem that we have in higher education. And together with other major research universities, major publics, Illinois, as I mentioned, UT Austin, University of Florida, University of Connecticut, and a whole bunch of elite privates as well. We'll go through the whole list. University of Wisconsin has the opportunity really to be a leader here in further elaborating its commitment to assessing its environment, learning about the phenomenon of the spike in campus anti-Semitism, and committing itself to being part of this effort at improvement and addressing this problem in the context, not the way it was in the 1920s, where the Jews had to do it all by themselves, but in the context of the university's commitment to diversity and justice and equality for all people here in the UW community. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions, Madam President.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Greg. It's hard to hear some of the things that you're saying. It's just so difficult to put yourself in the shoes of those students and possibly faculty and staff who are experiencing this. And I want to reiterate my support, along with President Rothman, of the efforts that you're doing with the CCI and other things. Mark, I did want to ask a question. If you could go back to the slide about, let's see, this was estimated reported incidents, maybe 4 slides ago.
Now you're challenging my technological
Sorry,
ability.
I sympathize, and I will just
Oh,
state
here we
my
go. Yes.
question.
Okay.
Okay, so my question was, you referred to reported incidents. Do you have any sense of how big that number would be? What is the number of unreported incidents that we might be looking at? Just a guess.
Yes. So based on the ADL Hillel survey that we did in 21, where well over 40% of our students don't know how to report. And as Greg said, part of this, frankly, is not so much because I talk to students a lot, not as much as Greg, but when they say they don't know how, sometimes that's masking an unwillingness or an apprehension to report, right? Because if you go and you report your roommate or somebody in your dorm or somebody in your registered student organization as having engaged in anti-Semitic taunts and attacks or vilification and so on, you're exposing yourself. So we estimate roughly, this is our own statistical folks here, and we've been in consultation again with University of Chicago statisticians on this, that it's underreported at approximately 70%. So if there are 200, let's say there's 240 anti-Semitic incidents in American higher ed, that's probably 30% of the total. So probably somewhere in the nature of 1,000 incidents every year on U.S. campuses.
Can you give us a couple of suggestions of what we can do as a system to encourage students to report, to better communicate how they report? What are some things we could consider?
Yes, thank you, President Walsh. The key in the area of reporting, and there are many different action items outside of reporting, but the key area in reporting is to make it known that the university is hearing you, is listening to you. And so instead of masking the reporting situation or opportunity, you might say, these are not really opportunities, but we'll go with that, as report bias or report hate, or use words like that. Actually name it so that the student can appreciate what is the university seeking, right? So if it's anti-Black racism, say that, right? If it's gender harassment or sexual violence in Greek life, say that, right? Because a 19-year-old needs to hear that that's what the university is asking, right? That's what the university is willing to hear, and that's tough stuff, as you said, Madam President. This is very difficult. If it's difficult for you, ladies and gentlemen, to hear this, imagine, a fine arts major at La Crosse, or I'm not trying to single out any campus here, but who's just going about trying to get her degree, right? An engineering major here at Madison, right? And something like this happens that morning. They imagine that they have better things to do than to go and report. But if the university can make it a little easier to say, yes, we actually do want to hear you. We want you to tell us what you experienced yesterday evening. Then you'll get a better, more honest display of what's actually going on your campus.
Thank you. Other questions from Regents? Regent Moran.
First of all, thank you for being here today, and thank you, Madam President and President Rothman, for having them here. 2 quick points, actually, for you, President Rothman. I know I'm a broken record, but with the CCI really being, the learnings really coming to UW-Madison and to UW-Milwaukee, is love to see a plan on how that gets spread 13 times. And I'll say that probably till I'm done being a regent, but how do we spread our learnings and our experience 13 times over? Because if we're truly to live the Wisconsin idea, the learnings on campus need to go beyond our campus walls. And as our esteemed guest pointed out, so much of the anti-Semitism happens on campus, but so much more seems to be happening off campus in the communities where we live. We have an opportunity to take the learnings from the CCI, to spread them 13 times over, and touch every part of the state outside of our campuses through those learnings, and bringing people together to tackle the subject on a broader perspective or broader landscape than just the students at UW. So I'd ask that we really look at plans for both of those.
Thank you, Regent Roman. Other regents, questions, comments? Yes, Regent Posh.
I think I heard you say that in the 60s and 70s, these incidents were pretty much non-existent. Was there an intervening event that all of a sudden sticks out as what changed?
Again, great question, Regent. This would require kind of a long discussion about the history of contemporary anti-Semitism in this country. I will say 2 things. After the Holocaust, beginning in the late 50s, when the American political community, the American political elite, and people who didn't pay much attention to the events in Europe in the 30s and 40s began to understand the magnitude of the Holocaust, it became essentially off the table to publicly articulate hatred against Jews, because it was seen as such anathema to engage in this kind of bigotry and discrimination. And so beginning in the late 50s and through the 60s and 70s in America and in Europe, the Jewish community experienced a unprecedented, really, suppression of the kind of stereotyping and bigotry and claims about Jews controlling the media and the banks and all of those stereotypes, because it was so unthinkable to replicate or try to engage in the kinds of tropes and stereotypes as Hitler's Germany. In the last 20 years, but especially in the last 10 years, memories of what the Jewish community experienced, a third of the Jews in the world were sent to gas chambers and ovens in the most advanced countries in Europe. People have forgotten that. People don't pay attention to that. People don't care about that. They have their lives to live. They grew up in a different time. And that, combined with a very aggressive effort by individuals who oppose Israel and oppose Israel's existence, to merge anti-Israel hostility with hostility towards the American Jewish community, has created a very toxic environment for some Jewish students. That's, I apologize for the very superficial 4-minute history of American anti-Semitism over 50 years. You could a semester-long class on that. It's probably taught somewhere at Wisconsin.
I would guess, yeah.
But that's the beginning of a reason why there was a elimination, I will say, or a suppression of this kind of discrimination for several decades. And it's now recurring in a very aggressive way. There are other political and social trends in America that we're all familiar with, the failure to be able to speak across difference, to meet people halfway, to engage in a conversation about people's different attitudes and perspectives and viewpoints that ties into this as well.
Thank you. Other questions from Regents? Gentlemen, thank you very much for that reminder of our history. I had a history teacher once who said to me, if reading history only makes you feel good, you're probably not reading history. So thank you for that lesson. We appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest at this point that we take about an 8-minute break. So if you would return to your seats by 10:05, we'll probably be able to start by 10:10.
I want to. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Please take your seats and we'll get back to the agenda. So with Veterans Day tomorrow, we now want to take the opportunity to look at how the UW system supports our student veterans as well as current and future military students. Wisconsin is widely recognized as having some of the most robust educational benefits in the country for military veterans and their families who wish to attend college during or after their service. This includes the Wisconsin GI Bill, which provides support over and above that available through the federal GI Bill. Our UW system universities also invest significant effort and resources into supporting these students. And that's what we're going to learn about more today in our panel discussion. I'd like to invite our guests to join us here at the table. And while you're walking, our guest panelists include university staff who provide direct services and support to students who are military veterans, as well as students who have engaged with these services. Joining us today are Joe Rasmussen, UW-Madison's Director of University Veteran Services, Aaron Kloss, UW Oshkosh Veteran Benefit Coordinator with the Veterans Resource Center, Daniel McKern, UW Oshkosh Student Association President and a United States Marine Corps Sergeant, and our fellow Regent, Jennifer Staton, a United States Army veteran who is currently a student at UW Parkside. Jennifer served in the U.S. Army in various roles between 2007 and 2014, including as a combat medic while deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Welcome to all. You need to lean kind of close into these microphones.
Right. I'm really short also, so I'm just gonna get
Me
in this
too.
thing. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that welcome and that opening. I will echo that sentiment about services in Wisconsin and some of the programs that are set up. The Wisconsin GI Bill is fantastic. It is a program that is unmatched anywhere else. It provides opportunities to veterans and their families that that they wouldn't have otherwise. So it is quite the program, and I think we could all be really proud about how some of that unfolds on our campuses. So I'm Joe Rasmussen. I am Director of Veteran Services here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I grew up in Janesville, Wisconsin. I served in the Marine Corps for 4 years, from 2002 to 2006, and I came back to the state to attend college. I earned a bachelor's degree from UW-Whitewater in social work and a master's degree here at UW-Madison, again in social work. I did 2 internships at the VA hospital with the intention of working with veterans. So I am where I am out of intention. I'm really proud to be here. I'm going to discuss, as we have a panel of 4 of us, what I see as an administrator, and I hope that some of my colleagues are able to share a little bit different flavor of what I see. So student veterans tend to enroll within weeks of separating from active duty. They show up to campus during a time of major life transition. While all students adjust to campus life, veterans are learning a new sense of self and identity. They move across the country or from overseas and have to refine study skills and habits after years of being out of the traditional classroom setting. In addition, students are more likely to fall into the traditional higher education categories that we use to suggest they need additional support, such as first generation, Pell eligible, and transfer status. Because campus life is vastly different than the military, student veterans are often looking for a trusted person or office. And most of the time, that's University Veteran Services offices like where I get to work, or the VA School Certifying Official, or SCO. Many SCOs and campus offices have become the modern day veteran service organizations. They're really providing the services that previous generations would get from the VFWs and the American Legions. University Veteran Services and other offices are often the first personal contact student veterans have on campus and can remain a trusted partner throughout their educational career. The GI Bill tends to be the first most important thing for all veterans. It's their literal lifeline. It's also extremely time-consuming for us to administer and can be a bureaucratic nightmare for student veterans to try to navigate. Many of our students live GI Bill paycheck to GI Bill paycheck. They come from active duty with very little savings, and many don't have the safety net of mom and dad. Student veterans can be very close to financial insecurity, and it's University Veteran Service offices and SCOs who are key to keeping them afloat. Guidance from school certifying officials on which benefits to use, which courses to select, and how to add and drop courses with minimal impacts save thousands of dollars to our student veterans. The GI Bill rules are very strict, and they often don't align with how students enroll and take courses on our campuses. Earlier this week, my office met with a student who had an instant $20,000 swing in financial gain because our SEO spent the extra time that with the student, making sure that she chose her classes and coordinated with her academic advisor to use the right combination of benefits. This work really requires a special set of skills, and school certifying officials in Wisconsin are amazing. Many, like myself, are veterans or are immediate family members to veterans. They are an extremely important process of the overall success of the student veterans in the UW system. The VA recommends a ratio of 1 to 200 SEOs per GI Bill students. This was also supported in the 2022 Blue Ribbon Commission on Veterans that the Wisconsin governor just released earlier this year. Most schools, unfortunately, across the country aren't close to that ratio. SEOs need to be a priority in the discussion of supporting student veterans, and I believe all schools should be at or above that minimum recommendation. While we all want our veterans to excel in the classroom, It's extremely difficult when GI Bill money is delayed and bills can't be paid.
Good morning, President Rothman, President Walsh, Board of Regents. Thank you for having me back again. Aaron Kloss, Veteran Services Coordinator for UW Oshkosh. I was in the Army National Guard in Wisconsin for 17 years, deployed 3 times, 2002, 2006, 2007. Graduated from UW Oshkosh with a Bachelor's of Liberal Studies in 2017 and plans to earn my start my Master's of Public Administration in 2023 at UW Oshkosh. I spent some time over the last few days trying to consider, and I'm not quite sure how you follow up from Joe over here with his very eloquent words about the things that are working on our campuses and the things that aren't working on our campuses. We had a student panel yesterday, actually on campus, and Chancellor Levin had a chance to come in and sit and listen to what our students had to say firsthand. It's one thing to come from me and Michelle Muntz, my education benefit coordinator, but it's very different to hear it directly from the students and things of that nature. And even having been out of my classroom setting for a short 5 years, many of those viewpoints had managed to change. So I think in addition to what Joe was just saying about the importance of servicing our veterans, our dependents, our spouses, our currently serving military members, it's also to remember that this population is constantly changing and their needs are constantly changing, and we need to constantly be evaluating so every 6 months, every year, what programs are working, what programs aren't working, and not just resting on our laurels and saying, well, this has worked in the past, we're going to continue to keep moving forward with this programming. So, thank you.
Daniel?
President Walsh, President Rothman, and the rest of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Chancellor Levitt and Provost Coker of UW Oshkosh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come tonight. But I'd like to start off with an apology that this morning you're only going to receive one testimony from a student veteran such as myself. Every veteran has an opportunity and a unique experience that they have, and they have a story. So let me share mine with you today. Like most people joining the military, I joined right out of high school. And in the Marine Corps training, it was not an easy adjustment to go from my civilian life quickly into that of military and structure and discipline. So throughout that training, I have people that I don't know, and to the left and right of me, I'm training with them, and it's a lot of uncertainty, but I quickly have a sense of community in what I'm doing. After my training, I had about a week off and I decided to go to UW Oshkosh. And I quickly understood how difficult it was to go transition from structure and all of this discipline to go to a campus where, oh, students don't have their shirts tucked in and they're wearing flip-flops to classes. What is this? This is a lot different than what I'm used to. So I wanted to find some place where I belonged, and I wanted to find people who I could talk to that understood where I came from. The Veterans Resource Center, the VRC at UW Oshkosh, was that place for me. It was a time of immense transition where I felt unknown again in a new place, similar to when I first joined the Marine Corps in boot camp. The VRC was opened me with welcoming arms, and it was a community where I never knew that it would come again. I would go there just to study, just to see friends, make new friends. I felt so acclimated with them that I decided to work as an intern for the Veterans Resource Center. But I just can't emphasize how important it is that veterans have a place on campus. It was instrumental to my transition, and I'm not fully aware of all the benefits when I first got to school. I don't know everything. So Aaron and his team are the experts at what they do. And it's just essential that student veterans go there for help and for guidance, for community, and to help with their transition. So I was able to quickly adapt myself to student life, and I felt normal again. COVID did not help that whatsoever. I lost my internship, went home, it was very different. And that's how I got involved with student government through a friend. And now I'm the student body president at UW Oshkosh, which I love. It's given me a lot of experience, a lot of leadership, which I think is very important on campus. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Danielle. And last but not least, Regent Staton.
Hello.
A little closer mic to your mouth, maybe, Jennifer. Thank you.
Is that okay?
That is perfect.
Okay. So I had quite a journey getting to Parkside. I joined June of '07, and I went to 10th Mountain Light Infantry Division. That's where I met my husband. We just recently celebrated our 12-year anniversary on Sunday, who is still active duty. That's why I'm bringing him up. Then I think my deployment to Afghanistan kind of put the seed of how I wanted to be something more than a combat medic. And that's when I started thinking maybe I should use my GI Bill. But because my husband's still active, timing and transferability and not wasting the GI Bill, I mean, that was all a part of the transition. So we made the decision that I was going to go to Wisconsin because this is where we want to retire. So I convinced him. And I started at Gateway Technical College. I wasn't a good student in high school, and I needed to work my way up the ladder. And I felt like Gateway was a good stepping stone, and I immediately was introduced to the vet reps at Gateway Tech College. And they really helped me in the beginning process. And then I did about 2 semesters at Gateway, and then I was like, maybe I need to do something more. And Parkside is a dream. I mean, I've lived right down the road. I grew up in Racine, and it's right there. So, you know, maybe I'll try there first. And lo and behold, there was a pre-PA program. Everything started to line up. And as soon as I told the vet reps at Gateway, they immediately made an appointment with the SCO at Parkside. And I got to do a face-to-face meeting where I was offered an opportunity to do a work study program through the VA, which is pretty essential with adult learners, I can say, because your resume, you're a little bit more than a traditional student. So having, I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, you kind of set yourself up for wanting to progress. And the ever-changing schedule of being a student is hard. So that work study program really creates an opportunity for adult learners, but it also creates subject matter experts in the GI Bill and transitioning. Right now, I am on my 3rd federal GI Bill, and I would not have gotten to that transition if it wasn't for the SCOs. The other veterans who had, you know, come before me used different GI Bills and understanding, and now that I understand a lot of the GI Bills, I can do that for fellow veterans. And it's important to get out there and try and, you know, educate them, because they're not going to come to you sometimes. So if I'm in class and I see somebody with a bag or something, how are your benefits? You know, I try and get out there and try and bring them to the veterans office, or I at least tell them to email, because that's where we all can monitor it and really try and bring them in, because a lot of them don't know and they think they do. And having subject matter experts in the work study program really helps, you know, create that peer-to-peer education and bringing them in and drawing them in, and having an SCO is amazing. Yes.
It seems like that SCO relationship is, I mean, it's crucial for so many of our students, but it really seems to be very important for our students who are veterans. Can you speak to that?
Yes, because let's use the post 9/11 for instance. When I got out, there was a delimiting date of 10 years, and then it changed to 15 years, I believe. And then 2017, they got rid of the delimiting date. I didn't know that until about a year ago. So even being, I fell into the group of, you know, getting rid of the delimiting date. I still didn't know that, but being in the office and, you know, someone coming in, the SCO is the one who told me that. And it's like, I mean, I'm not on the va.gov website every single day. I'm usually on Canvas every day. So I mean, it's simple things like that. Someone who is a subject matter expert in the ever-evolving laws and the changes that come. And someone, I think they have like, you know, I don't know if it's weekly or monthly meetings about what are they preparing for and what to expect and like for changes within certain GI bills. And I mean, the Wisconsin GI Bill is amazing for when you exhaust your federal benefits. So I just want to say thank you to that as well, because we do have quite a few using the Wisconsin GI Bill.
Great. Aaron, I wanted to ask you, you talked a little bit about the need to be nimble and make changes.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of something where you folks have had to pivot because of a change? I'm trying to figure out what kinds of things you're talking about.
Well, I mean, if we look at consider just how the demographic has changed on our campus. 10 years ago, we had a very healthy, robust combat veteran population on our campuses, individuals that had served in Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, things like that. Now, and perhaps Joe can, corroborate this, our population is actually about 50% dependents and spouses. Those individuals that were here 10 years ago, now their children and their wives or husbands are coming to school and using the Wisconsin GI Bill benefits. So the programming that, works well for veterans and for service members may not necessarily work well for dependents and spouses coming from a very different, not a different background, but a different perspective of the same background. Our office has currently been in the process of partnering with our social work program at UW Oshkosh. And this is our second year now having an intern placed in our office. So we're not only getting and she is a military dependent. So we're not only getting a perspective from a social work aspect, which is going to have, large reaching ripples and echoes out into the world afterward once they graduate, but also the perspective from that dependent or spouse. And that's really kind of affected how we've been programming and then diversifying the options that we have for our students on campus.
And your office serves both the veteran and the veteran's family.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jennifer, the other thing I really like about your story is the hand in glove relationship between Gateway and UW Parkside. Can you talk about what that was like? Did you expect to get such a friendly working together of those two groups? How did that land for you?
I think, Brad Bailey was the former SEO at Parkside, but he also worked at the Veteran Affairs Office in Kenosha and Racine prior to that. So he also deals with disability benefits. So I believe Rob Swanson and Eddie Vargas out of Gateway, they had went to him for disability benefits. So they already had a prior relationship. And then it's like you're paying it forward and maintaining that relationship. Rob is actually, he just came, we actually have an exhibit going for I Am Not Invisible. It's to create visibility on women veterans and the challenges that they have in the veteran community. And he attended, and we're trying to maintain a relationship with like certain events coming up. Like they have a cut-a-thon, I believe that happened Tuesday.
A cut-a-thon?
Yeah, Gateway Technical College has cosmetology school, and they have a hair cutting place. So I mean, they come in, they have donations, and you get a free haircut. So like they try and get as many people in, they perform donations. So I mean, we know about each other's events. And we really try to bridge the gap with events and stuff like that, just to keep in the know and, create opportunities for veterans.
And get a haircut.
Yes, yes.
Are there any questions or comments from other regions? Regent.
I apologize in advance if I don't get through this. In 1966, I was in my my third year at Platteville, and I got drafted. And I went 4 months of training, and an airplane picks you up and takes you overseas for 18 months. I came back to Platteville and finished my degree. I was mustered out in 68, and I came back and finished my degree. And tomorrow, I'd ask Chancellor W. Platt to explain what's going to happen.
Yes, Chancellor, thank you.
That we will be unveiling tomorrow. It's a Vietnam memorial that we're unveiling tomorrow on our campus. And there's been a variety of people involved, and we're going to honor those who were UW-Platteville students who lost their lives in the Vietnam War. And it's been a historian that's been involved. It's been our alumni that's been involved. It's been a labor of love with a lot of people, and we're excited to unveil that.
Thank you, Tan. How did that memorial bubble up? Was that the suggestion of an alumnus or?
It was, and it just kind of got some momentum. And then, like I said, we have a historian, a faculty member on campus who helped us curate the names, make sure we had it right. And it's an exciting event, and I encourage anybody to stop by the campus and see it. We're excited to honor those served.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments from Regents? Regent Weatherly.
You guys already talked about it. Veterans are very comfortable moving. How do we get more veterans to move to Wisconsin to come to school at the UW system schools?
Joe, you look like you're ready to take that.
I don't know that I can say exactly how we can get them to come, but I could perhaps share some of the barriers that I hear from families who are attempting to come to Wisconsin. So I'll certainly say that veterans, as we're talking about them living in different places, how the residency statutes work and residency for tuition is often extremely complicated for veterans and their family members. So people who joined from Wisconsin may believe that they're still residents, but our residency statutes often focus very strongly on physical presence. And because of tax purposes, a lot of people will change their residency based on where they're actually living. When they're ready to come back to the state, there are a lot of complications with that. So residency can be a barrier to that. The other thing I would say is the Wisconsin GI Bill, which is really, really accessible for family members, isn't discussed enough. So we're not out as a state, and this is my personal opinion, talking about what it can do for family. Is not to get in the weeds, but children of veterans can use this program to pay for their tuition, and it can pay for multiple children's tuition in the same family. It's extremely generous, but I feel like not enough of our former Wisconsin residents who are serving know this.
I would guess not. Regent Bogus.
I just wanted to follow up on that because my father's a World War II vet, still alive at 97, and trying to navigate the VA just for healthcare is a total nightmare. I've screamed on many occasions. So with the GI Bill and what you just said, how do we, or how have you helped the veterans and how external relationships to try and get more veterans to understand there's a GI Bill there to help them? I mean, is it a lack of counselors that you can reach out and pull them in and get the information that they need to make them understand that this is a really great thing for them?
Yeah, the conversation doesn't start soon enough. So FAFSA is known by everybody, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't start checking into their GI Bill benefits until weeks, days, or if they're really on the ball, just a couple months before they start school. But they're filling out federal financial aid and going through that process in October for the start of the September. So we've done a lot at Madison to try to outreach to every applicant and try to advertise this. It's of course reactive because we're waiting for people to apply before we can message them. But I would say earlier communications, especially to families who are military connected, could go a really long ways in helping them figure out what the total financial picture can be, which includes GI Bill benefits plus financial aid.
Thank you.
Regent Bechtel.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, first off, and thanks for the presentation and following up on Regent Weatherly's question. You know, we're going to be talking about strategic plan here in just a minute, and we're trying to figure out how do we bring in some populations to our university system that may not be adequately serving now, and also how do we create a magnet here in Wisconsin for folks to come. Jennifer, you're way too young to be thinking about retirement, by the way.
Did you win that lottery in California?
My husband only has 5 years left till he can retire, so it's coming up pretty quick.
All right, well, that's, boy. You know what I'm saying, I'm just joking. But how do we do a better job? And maybe, President Rothman, this is something we do on a follow-up basis, because, you know, I'm writing some notes here, so maybe the residency issue. You know, we go to the legislature and we ask for money, and we ask for that within the budget cycle, but you know, if there's a way we could get a legislative fix on residency, I think there'd be great reception for the legislature to work on that issue so that we can bring in, you know, if you're a veteran, maybe you're an automatic resident, and we welcome you to the state, you know, with that. There's got to be a fix there. The GI Bill and how do we market ourselves? We don't have large, you know, soldier populations, if you will, right? Because there aren't a lot of military bases here. So we're going to have to go out and recruit where these folks are, where they're stationed, where they're deployed, where their families may be when they're deployed. So we got to be thinking about that. So I guess just as a follow-up, I'd really like us to lean on this maybe in the spring and think about how can we target this population. I've heard for years that we do great in Wisconsin with the veterans benefits. And I know the employment community works a lot on that. So there's a lot to be done here, and I got to confess I don't know much about the subject, but I'd like to learn more and figure out how we can, you know, we want to graduate 41,000 students a year. These are the kinds of students we want, right? Or at least a segment of them.
Well, and it's interesting because I was talking to Chancellor Mone this morning, just coincidentally, and Mark, you may want to comment on this, but UW Milwaukee's got a well-recognized program for veterans that has a large population there about how success starts to beget success, and you start getting the word out about this is a good place to be, and that may be one stepping stone, but obviously there are some logistics, because you're absolutely right, Regent Bechtel. We have to find, to get to 41,000, we have to find the students. That's exactly right. So Mark, you may have, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Rothman, thank you. And I'm really, really happy to have this panel today, and thank you all for your service. Regent Bechtel, your question is spot on. I'm really, really happy to do anything we can to support veterans more. There's really at least 3 different aspects that I think are important. One is the onboarding and the kind of work that you've been describing. Then there needs to be the continued support, the types of things that you have in vet reps, or we call it Maverick, other types of things that are really pretty exemplary, I think, across all our campuses. We're doing pretty remarkable things. We've attained top 5 status in the country, number 5 in the country in terms of military friendly, with almost 1,200 student veterans or active military on our campus today because of tremendous support. But it's also a campus culture. So that's really the second component, where you engage faculty and staff and really work closely more than just what happens in the administrative side of things. And then the third piece, to really answer the question about how we can attract and keep more, is the employment pipeline. There's a lot of misperception sometimes about veterans are ready to go and coming out of college are ready. There's just like the transition in, there's a lot of work. I worked with our executive MBA program for 25 years. We had up to 50% veterans in that program in some years, and worked very closely with a lot of individuals. And the transition into employment, from exactly what you described, you know, the transition to college is one set of new realities, but back into the working world in a very different way. We need to pay attention to a lot of specific aspects in that area and work with employers. We've got a program, for example, with Rockwell that we had in terms of a lot of technology training that brought a lot of veterans in. And then they used those as part of their business model in terms of individuals who are really trained a lot around a lot of technology applications in IoT, Industry 4.0. And then those veterans could go elsewhere quite easily. And we have to work on that to keep those folks here, not just go elsewhere, because veterans are very mobile. So it's really kind of a package of a number of different things.
Daniel, I wonder if I could ask you, when you were getting ready to muster out of the military, did anybody bring up the subject of college education as a possibility? How is that handled?
Can you clarify what you mean by muster out of the military?
I'm probably using the wrong term as a civilian. When you were ready to leave the military and, you were closing out your work there, did they talk to you about college or what you might have to do or what benefits you would have?
So I'm currently in the Marine Corps Reserves, and my contract ends in July of 2024. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
No. So I'm still training. I have monthly obligations where I leave my civilian side behind, excuse me, and I go to Green Bay for my training and what have you, or other areas. I know during training, Joe, I don't know if you're also a Marine, they don't really talk a whole lot about benefits, or maybe briefly in the beginning.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah. But I know that when I toured Oshkosh, we went through the admissions building and we toured the Veteran Center. And that is, that made me realize, oh, there's something for veterans out there. So it was that initial tour that made me aware of the benefits in the GI Bill and what's going on, if that answers your question.
I think it does. Maybe Joe or Erin, you could answer. Do they have college fairs at Camp Pendleton or any place? I mean, I'm trying to pivot into what Regent Bechtel's saying. How do we get to them?
I think that's great. There is a little bit of outreach. You have to seek it, so it's not presented in front of you. But if you're looking for it, you can find some education. If we're looking from a Wisconsin perspective, though, there's not a Wisconsin presence on any of these military bases where people could find Wisconsin schools. They would likely partner with like local community colleges. During the transition program, and mine was 16 or 17 years ago, they briefly, very, very briefly touch on education, but the focus at that point was is what we were just hearing over here from the chancellor about just straight into the job force. So, I don't feel like it's talked about enough.
Erin?
In the National Guard in Wisconsin, there is, they do have annual mandated training, and quite often they do bring in recruiters and education individuals to talk about the benefits and stuff like that. They are often, last year I was invited to go to a career fair for the individuals that were coming off of COVID orders, and there were a number of colleges represented there as well. So I think they are making strides. One thing that I really want to touch on, and this is what got me into the UW Oshkosh originally, was my military network of friends. If we're serving our veterans and our dependents and our spouses correctly, they're going to tell the other individuals in the community outside. And I think that's really a powerful, powerful piece for making sure, for helping them choose our schools moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Let's see, Regent Weatherly.
Just to follow up on what a number of people have said. First of all, Joe, you talked about, when I asked you a question, that there are a number of policies that make it complicated, serpentine, et cetera, from a residency perspective. The good news is we're a policy-making board. I'd really like to hear about what those policies are and have administration take a good look at them so that we understand what we can do to ease the burden there. And that's more of a tactical thing. I really hope we follow up on that. But number two, just hearing from your experience, this seems like a great opportunity for us to better attract veterans. What you're describing is, there's no formalized process, et cetera. I'd love to hear from some SSEOs or others within the system about what are best practices for attracting veterans into the UW system. It strikes me from what I'm hearing as there's a real opportunity here, and there's a little bit of white space that maybe other universities aren't taking advantage of this opportunity.
I'd be curious who's the best practice, either system or college, and what are they doing that we can borrow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Chancellor Gao, you had your
Thank you. Yesterday, we had a panel very similar to this on our campus, and it was wonderful to hear. I asked that same question, what brought you to UW La Crosse? And the student veterans said it was really two things. One is the word of mouth about your campus and, you know, is it a good place for veterans? And then the other piece was, do you have good services, the very thing you're talking about, in place to support veteran students? And we are very fortunate at La Crosse that we have a woman, Jane Brannon, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Army and was actually our ROTC battalion commander. And then she retired and we very quickly hired her, and that has worked so well. So I would encourage all campuses to really make sure you have the right person in the lead in that position.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, anything else that you at the table would like us to know?
I just want to share, and this is a quick plug for, as we're talking about best practice, and if we want to get a pulse of what is happening. Here at Madison, there's a researcher, Dr. Ross Benbow, who has a National Science Foundation funded research study looking at veteran success. I'll read the acronym because it's VetWays is the name, but it's the Veterans Education to Workforce Affinity and Success Study. And he's looking at connectiveness to campus for military connected students. Longitudinally, he's going to be looking at workforce and whether or not veterans are successful based on how well they felt connected on college campuses. Lots of relevant data and current data about UW schools. So 5 UW schools are in this study, and it's a great source of information.
Do you know the 5?
Madison, Milwaukee, Whitewater, Oshkosh, maybe?
Any of our chancellors know the other 2?
I could pull it up quick.
Well, no, thank you, but I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. But yeah, I would like to know at some point. So
yeah, he had to limit it to 5 just because of the number of folks on his staff.
that's fine. Even if you're not in the 5, you can learn things.
Oh, goodness. Extremely relevant, right? So you don't have to just compare your school to a Madison, Milwaukee size school. I believe Whitewater is in there as my alma mater. A lot of relevant size schools.
Right. So the schools get a gold star, and those who look at the results and make changes get another gold star. So there we go.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Gold stars around.
Yes. Anything else from our panel? Yes, Dan.
So earlier I mentioned that every student veteran has a unique story, different in that how they approach their college careers is different. I think something that all the veteran centers on our campuses can do is be present. I know other veterans at UW Oshkosh who were not fully aware of where the veteran center is or what they can do. I saw a sign, I said, oh, it's right there. And you walk, oh, well, you know, so being present, being there is very important. So I cannot emphasize that enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, panel? All right. Thank you very much for your service to our country and for participating in our panel today. We really appreciate it. And I do want to know those 5, Joe, so just let me know. Thank you very much. Okay, President Rothman will now give us an update on the development of the UW System Strategic Plan. President Rothman.
Thank you very much, President Walsh, and good morning again, everyone. I'm pleased today to provide an update to the Board of Regents on our work on the strategic plan. Our intent remains to be able to be in a position to seek approval of the strategic plan from this board at the December meeting. I know we have been pushing hard, perhaps I have been pushing hard is a better way to describe it, but I do believe that there is urgency in our moving forward, that we need to get to the point where we get the planning in place and we start to implement, because ultimately implementation and execution of the plan is where we will have success and move the university system forward. I want to sincerely thank the chancellors and their teams, my senior leadership team at System Administration, Shared Governance, this board, among others, for their input and guidance as we have gone through this process. Let me just share a couple of preliminary comments. When we started this process, we undertook several preliminary, but I think very critical foundational steps. First of all, we talked about core values. The living or the not living of core values defines our culture. And I know I've mentioned this before, but the management guru Peter Drucker said, and this really resonates with me, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I believe that's true. If we can get the culture right, a lot of good things will follow. We also focused on the role of system administration vis-a-vis the role of the individual universities. We had some really good and productive conversations, I think, with the chancellors in that regard. And just as a reminder, we identified two critical roles for system administration in the overall governance of the UW system. First, it is the support role of being the advocate, the coordinator, the connector, so that we can leverage the strengths of the system across all 13 universities. And it really goes to something that Regent Rye said earlier about how can we share best practices. That's something that system administration needs to do. How do we advocate for the value of higher education across the state? The second is the stewardship role of providing oversight of the institutions that comprise the system, consistent with the requirements of Chapter 36, the policies that this board has adopted, and just good governance practices. Those dual roles may create some cognitive dissonance, is the way I would describe it from time to time, but we will continue to work collectively to do what is in the best long-term interest of the system as a whole. I am confident that as stewards, the leadership at system administration and in each of our universities share the goal of leaving the system better and stronger than we found it. And for me, that's the definition of good stewardship. As part of the planning process, we undertook a typical SWOT analysis, which revealed some real strengths about the system, including an incredible group of universities that are focused on students, research, and service. Committed faculty and staff who have the shared and noble mission of changing the trajectory of people's lives. An extraordinary group of students who are focused not only on the classroom, but also on the betterment of society. In internationally recognized research and creative powerhouse, namely our flagship UW Madison, as well as great research and creative institutions across the state, including our second R1 institution, UW Milwaukee. The affordability of a UW education relative to our peers, which make us the best value among public universities, certainly in the Midwest, but beyond that as well. The provision of services to business startups and entrepreneurs, as well as extension services throughout the state. And an enduring commitment to the Wisconsin idea, to name just a few strengths that this system has. At the same time, we also identified some real challenges, including around enrollment and long-term demographic patterns, lack of proportionate enrollment in our universities of students from historically underrepresented groups, and of those of lower socioeconomic means, below market total compensation being paid to our faculty and staff, which creates retention and recruitment challenges, an aging infrastructure that will ultimately impact the quality of education we can deliver, as well as the university research engine that is essential to the advancement of knowledge and the economic prosperity of our state, and a relative decline in state resources being devoted to higher education. There are also significant broader challenges facing our state that I would argue impact both Wisconsin and the system, for which the system can and must, in our view, be part of the solution. We know talented people with four-year degrees and beyond are in short supply, whether that be engineers or physicians or nurses or other healthcare professionals, whether that be teachers, business people, data scientists, and that list simply goes on and on. And don't forget those people, regardless of their major, who are taught to be critical thinkers and great writers, or who add to the fine arts and otherwise enhance our communities, all of which are necessary to maintain a thriving society and democracy. We are, quite simply put, in a war for talent in Wisconsin. And in my travels, I have heard that message from across the state, including most specifically from the business, healthcare, and educational communities. And the numbers for our state are not encouraging. Consider, for example, the following. 25% of our state's population is age 60 or older, and that percentage is expected to grow in the future. What that means is obvious. Fewer people in the workforce and a greater need for healthcare providers. Based on a recent study of outward migration, Wisconsin will have 130,000 fewer people in the workforce, 130,000 by 2030 as compared to what would be the case if our migration was neutral. We know the likely number of high school graduates will be declining at least until 2030. Wisconsin's participation rate, that is the number of high school graduates going on to college, is lower than most states in the Midwest, which means by definition, we will have fewer college graduates in the years to come. Just by way of example, over 10 years, if our participation rate was equal to Minnesota's, we would have an additional 30,000 students attending college. Couple the demographic challenges with a declining public perception of the value of higher education, and one has a real challenge. Based on a recent survey, only half of Americans believe that the economic benefit of a college education outweighs its costs. Half. It's a pretty stark statistic. Well, I find that, quite frankly, an astounding data point as we rapidly evolve toward a knowledge-based economy. That perception is our reality. Well, that is the perception. Data show that educational attainment continues to matter, with income increasing in proportion to educational level. Bachelor's degree holders earn 67% more than those with just a high school degree, and 39% more than those with an associate's degree. In my opinion, our primary issue in the state is not about enrollment at our system schools, but rather the fact that we are not turning out enough graduates to fill the needs of state employers. To be clear, employment or enrollment is a precursor to graduation. I get that. But what I'm suggesting that the shortfall in college graduates versus demand is a Wisconsin problem, not just a system one. It's exactly what Regent Bechtold was talking about. How do we get more people into the state? If we as a state do not solve that issue, those jobs that are now people are looking to fill will be moved out of Wisconsin if they can be moved. By necessity, they will flow to other parts of the country or the world. And those jobs, such as healthcare professionals, although even that's becoming more digital, which can't be moved, will be underfilled, leading to what I can only expect to be a diminution in the quality and accessibility of care. In short, I'll come back to it again, the war for talent is real. Producing more graduates is only part of the equation, however. The great work of our universities and research and other creative activities produce new knowledge, which has economic benefits, but also much broader societal impacts. The search for truth and for new knowledge is at the core of who we are. And we face some real challenges in whether we are sufficiently investing in that endeavor as well. We also face an expanded wealth gap in our state. Currently, the top 10% of Wisconsin earners made, on average, nearly 19 times as much as everyone else in the state. And that gap continues to grow. The widening gap is not sustainable for Wisconsin, either economically or socially. We are already seeing the bonds of our society being frayed. We know that education can be a great equalizer, so there is an important role for our system universities to play here. Higher education leads to higher incomes and improved livelihoods for all Wisconsinites. Okay, that's the downer part. Those challenges are significant, but they also point us to some great opportunities. The UW system can and should play a strong role in addressing the challenges we face today, whether that is to be addressing socioeconomic disparities, modeling civil discourse, enhancing communities around us by supporting and helping to create the industries of the future and driving economic prosperity and winning that war for talent. Indeed, our purpose, as articulated in the draft plan that you have seen, is precisely to deliver transformative educational outcomes and research that expands the boundaries of knowledge, and to extend the value of our universities beyond the boundaries of the campuses, seeking to enhance the quality of life for all in Wisconsin and beyond in fulfillment of the Wisconsin idea. We will fulfill this purpose by tapping the potential of this great university system to address the challenges I have just articulated. We have the ability to deliver a higher number of graduates by further embracing innovative enrollment strategies, including dual enrollment and direct admissions, and attracting veterans, I have learned this morning, among others. Promoting the value of higher education and being more visible in the K-12 schools. Attracting more students from underrepresented groups, including those of lower socioeconomic means, to our universities. Enhancing our retention and graduation rates. Reaching out to those estimated 600,000 to 800,000 Wisconsin residents who have college credits but have never finished their degrees. Actively pursuing transfer students to our universities. Aggressively investing in the infrastructure necessary to deliver high-demand programs such as nursing and engineering. We have the ability to provide hybrid and totally online education that meets the needs of our students where they sit. We have the ability to encourage lifelong learning that will be a necessity in a rapidly evolving knowledge economy through upskilling and reskilling program offerings for adult learners. We have the ability to be the engine of social mobilization by recruiting, supporting, and graduating those from underrepresented groups, thereby facilitating access as well as affordability through programs like the Wisconsin Tuition Promise. And we have the ability to invest in the advancement of knowledge through a robust research and creative activity function, as well as be models of civil dialogue and debate in a polarized environment. I know all of you have reviewed the draft plan, so I don't want to rehash what you have already read. I hope a better use of our time would be to allow this board to ask any questions you may have, and for the board to provide us guidance as we move forward toward presenting a final version of the plan for consideration and hopeful approval at the December meeting. With that said, if you'd bear with me, I'd just like to share just a couple of details relative to the current plan. The foundational items in the plan, including the definition of our purpose for existence, and the articulation of our core values, have not materially changed from the version of the plan you saw in October. We have added, however, an additional strategic objective since you last saw the draft. This objective better captures our research mission. It speaks to the contribution of the R1 universities in our system, both to the economic health of the state of Wisconsin and to the knowledge economy. We have organized our plan around 4 strategic objectives, all focused on the need and meeting the needs of the state of Wisconsin. 1, enhancing the student experience and social mobility. 2, fostering civic engagement in the public good. 3, creating and disseminating knowledge that contributes to innovation and a better understanding of the human condition. And 4, advancing economic prosperity. As you have seen in reviewing the draft, for each of those 4 objectives, we have outlined the strategies that we intend to pursue at the UW system administration level, as well as some measures by which we will gauge our success in achieving those targeted outcomes. Let me just say a couple words about the success measures. This is a system plan. Our targets, therefore, are system-wide targets. But of course, many of those targets will only be met through the contributions of our 13 universities in the system, each university is unique, and each of which may contribute at varying levels, or not at all in some cases, to the attainment of any particular target. While the chancellors have been instrumental in developing this plan, we are not yet at a place in the planning process where we can say with certainty what proportion of any particular measure any given university will contribute. For that reason, you will see that some of the measures have blanks rather than specific numbers. We are, of course, working through tying down those metrics now in preparation for finalizing the plan for the December meeting. Take, for example, our first strategy, Strategy 1, to increase access to higher education and improve rates of success for historically underserved students. We know that students and families of lower socioeconomic means have not traditionally been served by higher educational institutions as well as their more affluent counterparts. The federal Pell Grant program is aimed at undergraduate students with exceptional financial need. Currently, the maximum Pell Grant is reserved for those whose family income is less than $30,000 annually, with students whose family income is between $30,000 and $60,000 qualifying for grants at a lower award amount. Currently, 24% of our in-state undergraduate students qualify for Pell Grants. We'd like to see that number increase. However, we have not yet modeled what this will look like for each of our 13 universities. Once we have a sense of how much each of the universities can contribute to those Pell eligible student numbers, we will be able to calculate what an overall increase for the system should be. As I mentioned above, this draft of the strategic plan has an added objective that calls out the fact that our research mission is as important as our teaching mission. That we do this well is essential to the success of the UW system and to our reputation. We cannot separate the fact that we exist to create knowledge as much as to disseminate it through teaching as well as through the publication of results of our research and scholarship. Our reputation as a leader in this space rests largely with our flagship, UW-Madison. Additionally, we have a second R1 university in UW-Milwaukee. In order to succeed in retaining Madison's status as a world-class institution and maintaining a second R1 institution, we must redouble our efforts in this mission area. We must provide robust support for Milwaukee in order to continue to operate at the intersection of its research activities and its access mission. But we must be careful not to continue to lose ground at Madison relative to other top-ranked universities. In fact, we need to work and invest to increase Madison's stature among its peers. This is critical for Madison to be sure, but it is also vital, in my opinion, to the entire system. Having said this, we also recognize that research is a critical piece of the mission of all 13 universities in the system. And student participation that we call out in participation in research is one of it. Let me start that again. Having said this, we recognize that research is a critical piece of the mission of all 13 universities in the system, and student participation in research is one of the high-impact practices that we call out in the plan. We also must assist our comprehensive universities in identifying and securing enhanced funding in support of their research and creative activities. Research and scholarly inquiry, while not necessarily directly applied, often leads to advances critical to the flourishing of our communities and to solutions to our most pressing problems. For this reason, we will work with the universities to expand the focus on environmental sustainability, to respond to state and local challenges with research and policy support, and to increase collaboration with industry partners. Businesses and government agencies invest in good ideas. For this reason, a key indicator of our success in this strategy area will be an increase in research expenditures at the universities across the system. Another example we might look at is our Strategy 8, to drive enrollment to meet the needs of the state and the knowledge economy. We know that to keep pace with the industries that fuel the Wisconsin's economy and to create the industries of the future, we need to turn out more highly educated, highly qualified graduates. The UW system currently graduates about 37,000 students annually. We aim to increase that number by approximately 10% within 5 years. And we've set ourselves the ambitious goal of graduating 41,000 students at the end of the life of this plan. In order to reach that target, we will have to increase participation rates of Wisconsin high school graduates, increase the number of students who transfer into our system from other institutions, and raise our overall graduation rate for the system as a whole. But again, we need to take, as we look at those measures, we need to think about the uniqueness of each institution. UW-Madison, as an example, has a 6-year graduation rate that's almost 90%. If we are to move the overall graduation rate on a system-wide basis, our other universities will have to increase their rates, because I don't think we can expect Madison to be much higher than it already is. Finally, we believe that we can better serve those who started college but did not complete their degrees, and we intend to try to get them back by serving their degree completion needs. Each of these initiatives will require the universities across the system to pilot new, innovative enrollment strategies. As I noted at the beginning, the role of the UW system administration will be to coordinate with the universities to help them identify which initiatives will most likely meet their prospective students' needs, and to support those efforts with resources and expertise. Part of the overall strategy to improve access, increase enrollment, and graduate more highly trained Wisconsin residents is to have the universities in the system differentiate themselves. Balancing this unique strengths approach with a system-wide umbrella marketing campaign will help prospective students, returning students, and adult, i.e. non-degree seeking learners, identify the university that best meets their educational needs. As you can see, the plan we have presented has a great more detail than we had just 1 month ago when we presented it in October. I believe we are very close to completing the planning process itself, and we are eager to move forward to full implementation. I say full implementation because, in truth be told, we have already started to begin moving on many of the strategies that are outlined in the plan. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be back in December with a final plan for your approval. Between now and then, we will continue to engage our stakeholders, including representatives of the faculty, staff, and students across the system, our chancellors, you as regents, our legislative representatives, and members of the employer community to continue to refine the plan. If approved in December, and I hope that with your input today, we can have a plan ready for your approval then, we will move immediately toward implementation. I appreciate your time this morning to listen to those preliminary comments. And now I would welcome any questions, comments, or direction that you'd like to provide us.
I'd like to pose the first question. I wonder if I could back you up just a second. I'm aware that many of our campuses have a strategic planning process going on their campus. Given that we recognize the uniqueness of each campus, we don't want to make cookie cutters out of all of you. Can you talk about the role of UW system in having a strategic plan and how that's going to benefit everybody, and how will it work with the campus plans?
Very good question, President Walsh. What we did, we started this process, we actually mapped out and looked at each of the 13 strategic plans that our universities have. And there's a lot of overlap between those plans and what we're trying to accomplish here. Because, you know, the fact of the matter is, again, thinking of the two roles that the system plays, one of that is to be the coordinator and the convener. Really, this plan is the system plan is really boiled up from what a lot of the universities are already working on. And it's a way of, I think, presenting to our stakeholders, including the legislature, including other funding sources. This is what we're doing as a collective whole, with each university's participation being different and unique. And certainly the universities will have some things that are not in the system-wide plan that they're doing at their local level, which is fantastic. But we've tried to get that funnel so that we can speak as a group, so that this board can say, have we identified the strategic priorities generally that are then going to be implemented at each of the universities in different ways? So that's how we've approached it. And it's been really great working with the chancellors. I have had a great deal of education. I expect a degree from one of your universities for the education that I've gotten, but I suppose you'd want tuition for that, so I'm not going there.
And there are exams involved.
And there are exams involved. So other than today, which I feel like is like an exam, but that's another story. But you know, that's the constant, you know, the constant tension. But I do believe that we are stronger as a collective whole. And I think this plan is intended to try to drive that collective strength while still respecting and allowing for the individual autonomy that Chapter 36 provides for each of our universities.
Questions or comments from regents? Yes, Regent Underwood.
Thank you, President Walsh. I had a question. First of all, President Rothman, this is really exciting. I'm very excited about the work and the strategies that outline. And you mentioned that the regents will have an opportunity to be part of the stakeholder conversations going forward. Between now and December, how do you envision that? Like through small focus groups or through like surveys, or how do you anticipate to get our feedback?
I mean, I would hope we get some of the feedback today, Regent Underly. So in open meeting, I'm fine with that. I am certainly more than happy to arrange separate calls for those of you who have different guidance you'd like to provide us as we refine it. So my hope has been we've had conversations throughout the process and getting feedback. And a lot of the feedback that I received from the regents has been incorporated into the plan because it's been good, it's been thoughtful, it's been good. But if there are additional comments, I'm more than happy to arrange for separate calls. Or if you have comments today, I'd love to hear them now.
Yes, Regent Rye.
I truly appreciate the framework and some insight into the success measures because, you know, measures that didn't happen, and love the focus on growth and why we're here. A little comment on stewardship. You know, to me, part of stewardship is the responsibility to be here 5, 10, 15 years from now. And that means the economic challenges that we face. And we just, we'll get a report out of Business and Finance later today, but having left that meeting and looking at what I call the lack of reserves for the future, you know, understanding what stewardship metrics are going to be there around, I understand the revenue side of the equation, but would love to see some metrics around the expense side of the equation. Like I said, I'll be a broken record. What are we going to do at a system level? Because this is the board's strategic plan. You know, what guidance and what are we going to expect from system to deliver to us in a meaningful way around stewardship and expense reduction so we are there 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
And that's a very fair comment, Regent Rye. I would direct you to look at strategy 5, which is on page 4, that attempts to get that through a shorthand, the expense piece in particular, that we would maintain a CFI, which is a recognized measure of financial health at each of our universities of 1.1 or greater. Because I think it probably drives to that point about are we managing the bottom line? What we will do at the system administration level is we will go through a zero-based budgeting process to try to refine. But I think that the plan has to be twofold, and that's what we've tried to build in. It has to be both growth on the revenue side, and it also has to be being as efficient as we possibly can in a continuous improvement process to ensure that we are being good stewards of our financial resources, and including, you know, looking at, you know, how do we deal with the 2-year campuses? In fact, there's work already ongoing on that. But in terms of sustainability and action plans relative to those campuses that have been, as you know, challenged more so than our main university campuses, the smaller, the branch campuses have had more enrollment challenges. We have to look at that. We have to own that. And we have to make sure it functions. But I absolutely agree with you because we cannot be in a position where we continue down a path that is not sustainable. And I quite believe right now we are on a path that is not sustainable.
Right. And I appreciate the CMI metric and the zero-based budget strategy. I guess I'd, you know, at some point call on Sean, whatever, to help me with the forecasting of that. Is that aggressive enough for sustainability as we look at some of the financial forecasting? And it's obviously changing in a whole new world, even when you started this process to where we sit today, looking at the future and making sure that that's the right number. I'd like to understand that at a deeper level, maybe.
And that would be fine. We should arrange a call so we can give you that background.
Yeah, I think all the regents would probably appreciate some drilling down on that. I'm going to look through the eyes in the back of my head and call on Regent Atwell.
Thank you very much, Regent Walsh, and thank you, Jay, for your work. It's not an easy task to go out to all the campuses and pull people together to come up with a document like this. I want to make one concrete suggestion and then a general comment, which will be familiar to you, I think. The concrete suggestion, when we look at success measures, and I'm looking specifically at the increase in Pell eligible students as a percentage of in-state undergraduate students. I wholeheartedly support increasing the enrollment of Pell eligible students. I've learned over the years to distrust the use of ratios to define a success metric because they have both a numerator and a denominator. And I'm asking why we wouldn't actually put numbers in there, because it's possible to achieve that objective through underperforming on the denominator as opposed to really performing on the numerator. So just an idea, why not use numbers? And then secondly,
And let me,
yep.
I'll just comment on that, Regent Atwell. This is the difficulty of having a banker and a finance guy on the Board of Regents, but I think that's a really fair comment. We didn't present it as a way as saying we could underperform and still achieve, but I think you're right. If we look at the number, that's a smarter way of approaching it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then generally, we're talking in terms of reserves, and I think everybody who serves on the Regents, including myself, are looking for a way to invest more productively in the future of the state through investing in our university system. And this is extremely difficult in the kind of the bipartisan environment that we're in to make that case. And so to emphasize the obvious, what the document doesn't speak to is really resource allocation across time, across place, across buildings, across a digital strategy, and frankly, across paying our people, a subject that, when I'm out on the campuses, which I'm trying to do more of, the pay gap between our faculty staff and faculty and peer institutions, our competitiveness in the marketplace, our ability to fulfill or to fill unfilled positions to staff the mission. All those are all sort of competing things that I don't know how we're going to figure out how to do that. But if I have a quota criticism of the work, it's are we implicitly just sort of saying we're going to invest in equal basis across all locations and so forth. So I think there's just a lot of work that's not defined in here, and maybe it's my the impatience that's part of my temperance that's causing me to or temperament that's causing me to emphasize that point. How do we do resource allocation, and how are we going to make the case for smart, fair investment, in this environment? So, thank you.
No, and I appreciate that, Regent Atwell, and it's a really good point. It's one that I have thought about. Trying to get that level of granularity in terms of the allocation in the strategic plan, I think is hard, and I perhaps abandoned that attempt. But I do think you raise a broader point that we have to address is we are going to have to operate within the resources that we can create and the resources that are provided to us. And if we are not successful in that, we are going to have to go back and seek about how we prioritize some of those resources, even among the priorities that we've already established, because there are things that this plan said we will not do. We will not create a broad-based online institution comparable to Southern New Hampshire. There are choices that have been made in this plan, but if we become even more resource constrained, then I think we're going to have to then prioritize with the direction of this board where we put our markers down, and I think that's going to be the challenge in front of us going forward. My hope is that this is the starting point for a conversation as to why further investment in the UW system is essential to the long-term health of our state. Because if you think about those, the demographic numbers, the migration numbers, I don't know where this state is going right now. Because if you looked at that and you said, we are on a downward trajectory in terms of what we can expect of this state. And I think all of us sitting around this table love the state of Wisconsin. And it is incumbent upon us to raise our hand and say, listen, we cannot continue to operate like we have historically, given the way things have changed. Our market has changed. Because again, if we do not graduate more students into areas where they are needed, and that includes the philosophy major that goes on to run a large company. So this is not just a vocational piece. This is a broader aspect of that, because the people that we are educating are going to be the people that are going to create the jobs of the future that we don't even know exist today. If we don't do that well, the economic health of the state, I think, it will decline. Does it fall off a cliff? Probably not, but it will not reach its full potential. And that's what this plan, a lot of this plan is going for. I mean, it's about the graduation, but it's also about the research. Because those have to go hand in hand for this to be successful.
Thank you. Regent Weatherly.
I have a question and a comment. First of all, Jay, I've been through a number of these, and quite frankly, this is probably better than anything I've ever produced. Although we can quibble about what kind of standard that is. So thank you very much. I do have a question, which is, as I've gone through these processes before, the hard part for me isn't saying what we're going to do. It's what we're not going to do. So what are the things that are implicit in the strategic plan or in the background that we are going to stop doing so that we can prioritize the things that are in here?
And I think a lot of those, Regent Weatherly, go down to, I mentioned one, we're not going to be an online university. I mean, we're not going to broaden that aspect. We are going to be looking at, when we look at to be efficient, to achieve the levels that we have to achieve, are we going to have to look at some programs that we have done historically that maybe we can't do anymore? Are we going to, continue to try to starve this organization from a financial perspective? Or do we change our view on that to provide the resources that we need to invest? I think there are, when we think about zero-based budgeting, certainly at the system administration level, what are we doing right now that we really need to sit back and say, okay, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that anymore because we don't see the value in it. And I think those are difficult exercises, because you get into, as you know, a pattern of looking at something and say, well, we've always done this, so we're going to add 2% or 3% to that on the budget, and we're going to continue to do it. This is really taking a fresh sheet of paper and say, if we were going to start again, anew, fresh, what would it look like? Where would we put our markers down, and where would we not invest? I think that's an iterative process that we will need to go through. But I think that's how we are going to approach this. But I also look at this too, Regent Weatherly, and say, if we can't get the funding to do this, and if we can't create the funding to do this, I think we have to face some pretty tough questions in terms of what does our footprint look like? What does the future look like? I think it's too early to come to that conclusion, because I think the state needs us to be producing more graduates. And that's the part that we have to focus on.
Thank you.
Regent Peterson.
Yes, thank you. It was a very interesting presentation, and I have a couple thoughts. 50 plus years ago, when kids went to university, like me, and I was a first generation, you went to the university. The university did not come to you. If you didn't know about it, you didn't go. 30 years later, when my kids went to university, they went to the university. They knew about it because they had a mother that brainwashed them. And they went to the university. What my suggestion is and concern is that the marketing I don't see it. I don't see the marketing. And I think that we have to, at some level, we have to go to the people instead of just having them come to us, which back during the baby boom and everything, there was so much, there was never enough capacity. So they just sat there and waited till everybody came. And if we're going to truly do the Wisconsin idea, I think we have to, as I'm not saying it will necessarily work, but we have to look very seriously at these 2-year branch campuses. After I've visited 2 of them in the last week, and people are quite dedicated and committed to the idea of the university being in these smaller places. And I know that they're having terrible time with enrollment and everything, but part of that has to be COVID. I mean, we just lost our momentum at all levels. So if you think about the Wisconsin idea, you think about DEI, and you think about these 2-year campuses, that is an opening. And everybody said this that I talked to in the last few days. That is the opening for a lot of people from economically, they want to stay home. One girl told me yesterday, I'm here because I wanted to stay home to start. And I know a lot of people who have done that and have been very successful. So we got to think about the Wisconsin idea, and that has to do with moving toward the people, not waiting for them to come to us. And that involves marketing, considering some way to market the 2-year branch campuses. And maybe that's just a perspective that might help. It would work for me because the university, to where I live, the university is a complete mystery and nobody knows anything about it.
And I do think that lack of presence does create the perception in people's minds that there is not value of going to the university and the value of university education, because you hear the horror stories of somebody who went for 3 years, didn't graduate, and ended up with $200,000 worth of debt. You can't do that in our system. If you have $200,000 of debt as an undergraduate, you've been going to a school for a long time, right? And that doesn't work. But I agree with you in terms of, I think there are a couple of trends that are going on. One is if we can become a little bit more consumer oriented in terms of how we outreach and have those conversations, that we make ourselves easier to access. And I think that's a lot of some of the challenges we have around transfer and around other challenges. I think that's a big piece. Part of it is to have the people, because these 13 chancellors do really terrific work. They really do. And Regent Weatherly, I should have said when you said, this is not my work product, it's the work product of a team. It really is. But they have to have the resources at the admission side, at the advising side, at the career counseling side, to have somebody go through that process. And I think one of the things that we have, by necessity, they have had to take action with is rationalizing the amount of resources they can put into that. That's counter to what I think we need to achieve. But I think there's also another phenomenon going on in terms of how much can be hybrid in terms of being available digitally. How do we deal that with, certainly with adult learners? I think the online program makes a whole lot of sense, because they're not going to be able to come to us. We're going to have to go to them and communicate this as we can help you go through this process. For the other group of students, how much can be hybrid and not, and how do we deliver that differently? Those 13 folks over there are all working on that. We're trying to be helpful in terms of, again, being the coordinator and the convener. But ultimately, the educational and the teaching is delivered at those universities, not at system administration. So I think all of that is point. The other point I would make, and since I know it is for first generation student week or month, Chancellor Ford, I forgot which one it was, but the enormous courage, and it's only hit me, it took me a while to figure this out, which I apologize for, the enormous courage of those students to take that leap when they may not be getting direction from family members, or they may have family members who are affirmatively saying, why are you doing this, is incredible. That's where we need to be in contact with that group. And you'll see, and one of these, and Regent Atwell, you'll notice that in terms of first-gen students, we do actually have a number, not a percentage. So, but how do we reach them in the very way that you're talking about? Because that's going to be critical, because if we don't do that, we saw with the affordability study as an example that notwithstanding where our tuition was, it was still not, the system was not being the equalizer from a social mobility perspective, because that 10-year snapshot, we had fewer students of lower socioeconomic means in our schools today than we did 10 years ago. We've got to change that equation.
Regent Bechtel.
Okay, Jay, you want to have a discussion? Let's have a discussion. First off,
President Walsh, I think we're out of time.
It's almost lunchtime. Look at the time.
would the witness be sworn, please? No, I mean, first off, thank you. Kyle, I'm sure your reports were excellent, your plans were excellent, but this really is great, and I can't believe how much progress we've made in a short amount of time. So thank you, chancellors. And, you know, this is a pretty bold plan when you look at the success measures and that we're really making some commitments here. So I do applaud us on that. I'll follow up on what Bob was saying, because I had the same thought on the Pell eligible and the percentage. So let's move it to a number. And there's a few of those. We say double, we have percentages, and I would just look for numbers as much as possible in all those success measures. So I'm going to jump around here a little bit. This morning we heard about veterans. So maybe in S.1, if we have the time and we could come out with some measure on veterans and how we're going to try to recruit that population, we could easily add that in S1 to kind of think about the veteran population. And again, it may be raw because we're just going to be figuring that out. But as you and I have said, Jay, let's get the plane flying, then we'll fix it once we're up in the air. I think we've done a nice job incorporating internships, because I do consider when we talk about high impact practices, I think internships are really very impactful and impactful to the wallet, because maybe you get a job. So not only are you learning what in school and getting a different type of learning. So I think we've hit that hard enough, but kind of think about whether or not we have enough on the internship aspect. I think we're a little thin on 5.9, work with applicable universities to develop action sustainability plans for the 2-year campuses. To Kyle's point, I'm not sure what the future is for the 2-year campuses 5 years from now. And I think we need to be more specific about that and kind of tackle that issue. Are we the right stewards for that? Should it be turned back to the counties? Should we create work centers? You know, these are big ideas, and maybe I shouldn't say these in public, but I think we're all thinking about it. And I would like to put a little more meat on the bone to 5.9. And I'd really like to hear from the chancellors either now or in the future, you know, are you the best stewards for the 2-year campuses, or should we be looking for some other solutions and work with the legislature, work with the county governments, whether or not, you know, some of these 2-year campuses might not be better as workforce centers as opposed to a 2-year campus. I get the idea of they can be feeders into the university system, and I want to be respectful for that, but we do have a lot of them, and they're not well populated. The enrollment is quite sparse on most of those. So I think we got to be a little more specific and challenge ourselves on that issue. Yeah, please. Anytime.
Director, just ask a question around that, because I appreciate that the metrics around that and even the strategy itself is not well defined. We're kind of flying that airplane now because we have a task force that is looking at those, and it's not a one size fits all, because each of those are unique in and of themselves in terms of what they look like and how we approach them. And it is also the challenge that each county that has one is very proud of that, and it's important to the county. And how do we, if the enrollment is not going to be there, I think you're absolutely right. How do we morph their mission so that we still have a presence, but that presence may be very different than it has been historically. And that's, each of the chancellors that have responsibility for those campuses are working on that. We're going to try to assist them in that process. And it would be great if we could come up with a more specific metrics. To be candid with you, I'm not sure we're far enough down the line to do it other than to identify it as an issue. And I appreciate that it is an issue.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think we can have a success measure on 5.9. But we say work with applicable universities to develop action sustainability plans for the two-year campuses. I agree with that. I think it's a start, but would we add in and who owns those campuses or what's the mission of those campuses? I just think few more phrases or thoughts so that we are recognizing that that is an issue that needs to be decided. And I think it needs to be decided in the next few years. Centers of excellence is something that's in the statutes. And it's something that I think we've all been working on. And I'm not sure, Jay, how we bring that out or tease that out further, but I'd like to see a little bit more on the challenges to the campuses. What are you great at? How are you going to continue to be great at that? And what are some things that maybe you don't need to be doing? That whole resource allocation method. And maybe if we think about the California system or some of the other systems around the country, that transferability of credits. I mean, should we put out a marker that says we really want students on campus A to also have at least 10 credits from another campus? I mean, do we want to actually try to encourage or put some marker out there that says we really want to see students getting credits, getting education, either from the university, the idea, the internet university, or maybe from a different campus. We're working on that now with the idea of the water stewardship program, and we want students to kind of move around campuses as they're doing their water studies. Is that something we should be thinking about?
May I just comment on that?
Yep.
Because we don't have, and when we have it compiled, I'd love to share it with the Regents. There is a lot more collaboration among the 13 universities than I appreciated coming in. And Scott, I think the number of things that you're addressing, and I think these are good points, and I don't mean to, this is not intended to be defensive. I think it is a process that is already beginning. And I think you can think of if a program, for example, there's less demand for a specific program, is it something that could be offered on a hybrid basis at one university into the other 12 or into the other 11 or whatever that may happen to be? That stuff's going on already. And I really applaud the chancellors, and they're working together and saying, okay, where do we need to leverage the strengths that we have amongst ourselves, particularly the 11 comprehensives? They can still be comprehensives, but the program offering may, in certain instances, be coming from a different university. And I think there's a lot more of that going on than I had appreciated. So, when we get that compiled, we will definitely share it with the board, because I think it would be good for this board to see.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. And, likewise, would we like to see every entering student into a UW campus to have already earned 10 credits, towards their college degree, because we're linking back into the high schools?
Correct.
Right? So those
Correct.
types of things where we spell out more specifically, we want to see students getting credits on different campuses. We want to see students coming to college already with some college credits in their back pocket, which then is going to help us on our graduation rates and everything else. So just something a little more meat on the bone where we're challenging ourselves on those kinds of metrics. And then my last point, Jay. I think you were very wise in starting your discussion with the doom and gloom show. The number of high school students and how many are matriculating into college, the high school graduation rates, the fewer workers in our workforce, 130,000 by 2030. I mean, you and I hear that for our business partners, that we need more talented college-educated people in this state to move a knowledge economy forward. And very much applaud the new emphasis on the research pieces. And we got two great R1s, and we do need to fund them, and that's a unique mission that needs to be spelled out, and I think we've done that now. And I think as we do this, we do need to go, as you're saying, Jay, we have to go to our partners and ask for an increase in investment. And I see our partners as the state, the private sector and foundations, federal grants and programs. And this would lay out, why we need to do this. Do our taxpayers and citizens agree with it? I think they will. But I guess, Regent Walsh, your comments today about elections, this board can really set the tone for what's going to happen the next 2 years in Wisconsin, right? We're going to have a governor that's probably going to veto a lot of things, and we're going to have a legislator that's going to ask for a lot of things, and they're going to be fighting. That's the reality of where we're going. No new news there, right? But this board, look around this room and where we all come from and the different perspectives we have. And I would just challenge each and every one of us, let's come together and kind of chart the course for the state. This is what we're doing, and we're damn proud of this university system, and we're damn concerned about the future trajectory of this state. And there is an urgency to this. If we don't make these decisions, they'll be made for us. So I really applaud where we're going. Keep the foot on the gas. A couple more ideas that we've given you as we've all kind of talked about it. But I do ask this board to really lean in on this and be advocates. Don't be shy. We got to be vocal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Regent Underly.
Are needed and where they're needed, and then get graduates into those jobs. And I was looking at the plan, and I think it would fall in 9.2 in that area. I would add that we need to work, like Regent Bechtel said, with state government, perhaps with the Department of Workforce Development, to identify where those areas are, what the jobs are. If northern Wisconsin needs a dentist in this particular part of the county, let's, identify, or a large animal veterinarian or whatever it is. But I also feel like we need to do this in collaboration with the tech college. And then we also need to work with our K-12 schools as those students are coming out of high school to identify the pathways that would most likely fit those scenarios that the state needs for economic development.
And I appreciate that, and I think greater collaboration with the state agencies and the tech colleges is a really good point. I have to applaud my team at System Administration. Ben Passmore and his group have actually devised something like that, where you can identify, and obviously it's projected, but it at least gives you some directional guidance as to what is needed. The other point that I would make, Regent Underly, though, is I want to be careful because I heard this, and appropriately so, from the chancellors, saying we are preparing people for a future that we don't know exists. We don't know what it's going to look like. Part of it will be, I went to law school. Is that vocational training? Yeah, I suppose it is. But it was also the undergraduate experience that I had, that I know those 13 universities are doing day in and day out, about teaching people to think critically, teaching people to write well, teaching people the fine arts, and how important that is, because those are the skill sets that you can take and then synthesize all this information and chart a path forward. That's what I believe the universities are doing, and doing really, really well. So I do think we need to be facing, the job needs of Wisconsin and trying to identify those as best we can. And I know in your area that just the shortage of teachers is huge. How do we best address that? But I also think having fewer liberal arts majors is a really good thing, that we have to be careful that we don't move too far from that, because I think that some of those folks are going to do some exceptional things in areas that they had nothing to do with their major, which I always find fascinating. But so I think it's the balance. But I think your points are really well taken in terms of, can we do a better job of connecting? And I think that's well taken. So thank you.
Regent Weatherly.
If I could just make an observation about the Wisconsin idea, and the purpose is very clearly laying out. The second sentence is very clear about the Wisconsin idea. It references it. I would be fascinated by what you and the chancellors thought about what the Wisconsin idea means in the digital age. I think about my 17-year-old cousin who lives in Wausau, who could theoretically be taking college classes at most of our schools right now. We could be relevant in his life when he's 17, when he's 16, when he's 15. But then I also think not only about how do we be relevant to high school age kids that are still going to college, and how do we deliver our product differently, but then I also think about our recently departed Regent Corey Saffold. I drove him home from a meeting once, and I just assumed he went to Madison. He lived in Madison. He talked about Madison, and he goes, "No, I go to UW Whitewater." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "I take all my classes remote." I'm like, "When's the last time you've been on campus?" He's like, 3 years ago. He is a mid-career professional. He started life as a law enforcement officer. Then he transitioned into being a school security professional. And we talk about all these people with some college or the ability to advance in their 30s and 40s. But Corey's a great example of how we were able to offer him the education he needed in his 30s for his career. And I don't know if he could drive to Whitewater except when he gave the commencement speech. I mean, so there's all these opportunities. So for me, I don't have the answers here, but I'd love to see what the system thinks about what the Wisconsin idea can be, given the tools that we have available to us that weren't available to Van Heist at the time.
And I very well put. It's a fair question. And I just a couple of responses because I think it goes back to what Regent Peterson was talking about earlier. And that is, how do we meet the student where they are at? And well, it's not if we're moving into a knowledge economy, we are moving into a knowledge economy. How do we change how we address any particular student? Because I am still a firm believer in an in-resident experience for a traditional student. I think there's a lot of value to that. You'll learn a lot in the dorm. You'll learn a lot having dinner with people. Some of it's good, some of it's not, but it's all good life lessons, right? And I think there's real value to that, but there are some people who can't do that. So how do we help them and cater to them and meet their needs? And then if you think about how fast things are changing, how do we do a better job of attracting a lifelong learner who may come back and say, "Listen, I want to get some exposure to cybersecurity, so I have a working knowledge, so I can move up in a job. I may have a degree, I may not have a degree. I'm not seeking a further degree if I already have one, or I'm not seeking a degree at all if I don't have one." How do we address that person? Because you think about, we're here to serve the state, and that goes back to the concept of the Wisconsin idea. How do we do that differently in a broader framework so that we don't pigeonhole ourselves and say, okay, you get an associate's degree, you get an undergraduate degree, you get a graduate degree, postdoc, whatever it is. I think it's a broader spectrum than that. And that's what these folks are already doing. It really is pretty incredible. But I think we just have to continue down that path of how do we continue to meet the needs of our students and our prospective students, because that will fulfill the Wisconsin idea, just that. And it may be Corey's situation where he's sitting in Madison, going to school at Whitewater. We're going to see more of that. And I think we have to be open to that, while at the same time still expressing for that may be really great for one student, but it may not be the right answer for another student. And ultimately, we want to turn out well-rounded human beings, because the social experiences and everything else that accompany being at a university are really important, I believe, anyway.
Okay, we have time for 2 more quick questions. Regent Ryan, then Regent Paul.
First of all, I found the right packet, so thank you for pointing me to S5. So now I saw the metrics, so I had the wrong packet open. To Regent Bexell's comments and what this plan is, this is our advocacy document. So I think as you wordsmith this, it's what we will use as regents when we approach those in Madison and those in our communities to advocate. So I would ask for that thought process in mind when putting the success measures down. So to that point, S8 The first one, one of the issues that I have, even in my own household, is how do you keep Wisconsin high school students in Wisconsin? And you have the best education possible in the state of Wisconsin. Why would you ever think of leaving it? And we had a great talk on our walk in this morning about that in my own personal 17-year-old experience right now. And really setting a metric on retention. And I think S1 does it, but once again, this is our advocacy document. So to wordsmith it, so it definitely shows it there that one of the goals that the system has is keeping Wisconsin graduates in Wisconsin to be educated, because then we do know career-wise that there's a higher likelihood of them, staying here and accomplishing all of the goals. And like I said, I think that 27 to 34%, I'm with Bob. I'd rather have a number than a percentage. Point that one out again too. But if there's a way to articulate that more, I feel like that would help us in our advocacy journey, because this document to me is what we'll take to meetings and show stewardship, growth, and what it means for the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're in a good place. A lot has happened in the last short period I've been on the board. We have new regents. We were kind of in a holding pattern because of COVID also. Filled a lot of regent positions. Last month, we had great discussions on facilities. Great discussions. Phil, and go along with Regent Peterson here, facilities give learning something people can see. Facilities give learning a place to go. And we need facilities. We have a strategic planning process, be honest with you, that I think was quite impressive because it has measurable outcomes. And the outcomes give something for all of us, including the regions to work for, including policy that helps cement the direction we're going. And in the end, we need resources. And the resources are going to come partially through tuition, but through the biannual budget processes. And the pieces are ready, the time is right, the people are right. So I want to compliment President Rothman and the regents for working on, because I can only imagine what goes on in the discussion in some of those sessions. And I also heard, visiting the campus too, we have a lot of great people on those branch campuses, and they are ready to do what they need to do to serve their communities. And so I think the timing is really right, and you should feel comfortable to asking us, even demanding us, to help when the time comes if we improve the strategic plan.
I just wrote that down, Regent Posh, so thank you very much.
Your name's at the top of the list. So I can't decide. Well, thank you very much for that presentation. I'd like to publicly thank the senior staff at UW System, who I know has done a tremendous amount of work, and especially our chancellors for helping to educate our leaders and help us make this the best plan for the system we can. But especially this gentleman here to my right, who, as far as I can tell, is pretty fearless in the face of fire, hurricane, and earthquake. This was not an easy task for a new system president to undertake, especially someone without a higher education background. And I think if you had seen the amount of work and the amount of listening that President Rothman has done, I think you'd agree that we are in very good hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, having said that, it's lunchtime. Reconvene at 1. Yeah. So I gotta fish my eyes out here. And let's reconvene. I'd like to start the afternoon session by calling on Regent Bechtel, the illustrious chair of Business and Finance, to walk us through.
Yeah. Well, that's never got. I never got. When did he become a lefty?
Thank you. Yes.
Barbarians at the doors.
Thank you, Regent President Walsh. Our committee met this morning, and first we approved a UW-Madison agreement with Transact Campus for its suite of hardware and software for point-of-sale systems that support campus dining and retail operations. The parties are nearing the end of a current 10-year contract, so this agreement results from a competitive RFP process conducted earlier this year. It includes some modernizing features as well. The total cost for the new agreement over the next 10 years term is $3.2 million. In a separate action under the same agenda item, the committee then approved the addition of this project to the UW System Report on strategic plans for major IT projects, which had been approved by the board in February. So we're just adding this to that regular report. Item E, the committee approved a UW-Milwaukee agreement with Verizon Wireless. Those on the board recognize that we've had several different contracts, successful ones at that, between UW-Milwaukee and Verizon. This one adds additional equipment at the Kenilworth building, just south of campus. It increases the license fee paid to UWM by $2,600 with annual 3% increases. You may wonder why we're presenting a $2,600 item. It's because the cumulative value of the agreements between UWM and Verizon exceed $1 million. So that was item E. Item F, again, Regent President Walsh, as we continue to kind of look at policy documents and streamline and make sure we're doing things efficiently and well, we looked at several different policies. The action in item F rescinds Regent policy 6.3 and 6.6, and then combines remaining relevant portions of those policies into RPD 2021. It's titled University Personnel Systems. The proposal also modifies RPD 6.5 and renumbers both that policy and RPD 6.4 in order to place all policies related to personnel now in section 20. So this was provided to us in the packet, and so hopefully everyone got a chance to kind of walk through that and read it. It made sense to our committee. We support this, and we'll be asking for your support on that later today. Item G, Vice President Sean Nelson presented the UW System Program Revenue Balances Report for fiscal year 2022. The Regents will recall that these overall figures were publicly released earlier this summer. We went through the full report as a committee, 150-some pages. And quite a bit of comprehensive level of details provided in that report. As was announced back in the summer, the total unrestricted program revenue balances increased by $125.6 million, primarily as a result of two factors. One, the allocation of additional federal funding for COVID relief, and two, the fact that many operating expenses remain below pre-pandemic levels. Now, this balance represents a reduction of $8 million since the inception of balance reporting in FY 2013. Or if we looked at it in inflation-adjusted dollars, it's a 21.2% reduction since that time. These balances are expected to continue to decline, as they generally had each year through FY 2020, due to the one-time nature of the federal COVID relief funds. It's worth noting that about 86% of the unrestricted balances held by the campuses meet the Legislative Audit Bureau's definition of obligated or designated for a specific project or purpose. So these things are all earmarked, they're going to be spent, and the campuses have a plan where to put these dollars to use. So while it's a rainy day fund, it's a fund that the rainy day is right around the corner for most of the campuses. The report offers details on the program revenue balances by category for each institution. Those universities with balances exceeding 12% of expenditures in any category have provided details on the projects and initiatives for which those funds are obligated or planned. So as we approve this report today, and the committee has determined that adequate plans and justifications are in place for institutions with negative balances, institutions with balances exceeding 12% of expenditures, and for the multi-year spending plan submitted by UW System Administration for the entire UW system-wide balance, all in accordance with Regent Policy Document 21-6. So that concludes our report. And on behalf of the Business and Finance Committee, Regent President Walsh, I now move for approval of agenda items D1, D2, E, F, and G.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, motion passes. Thank you, Regent Bechtel.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Regents and the UW system, we'd like to offer sincere condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Carl Gulbranson, who passed away last month at the age of 75. Carl was a true giant in advocating for expanding the horizon of what's possible in scientific research, and it's impossible to measure how many people owe him a debt of gratitude. Carl had a PhD in physiology as well as a law degree, both from UW-Madison, and he put both to work in the cause of patent law. Quoting from his obituary, in 1997, Carl became director of patents and licensing at the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, WARF, a foundation formed to patent and commercialize inventions developed at the University of Wisconsin and to use the revenue derived from those inventions to fund research and further the University of Wisconsin's mission. He became managing director in 2000, retiring in 2016. During his tenure, the WARF endowment grew significantly, allowing WARF to give hundreds of millions of dollars back to the UW. Carl strongly believed that WARF should fund and support developing technologies and startup companies. He also believed that the policy and law, the Bayh-Dole Act, that allowed inventors and institutions to own inventions created using federal funding strengthened this country and making it the greatest engine of innovation in the world. Despite some occasional controversy, Carl was also a strong advocate for the use of stem cells in medical research. Tom Still, president of the Wisconsin Technology Council, said Carl was among those people in an early stage who recognized that stem cell technologies would help revolutionize medicine, and it helped put UW-Madison and Wisconsin on the map. Thank you, Carl, for making a difference. And again, our condolences to Carl's family, who are neighbors of mine, wonderful people, friends, and colleagues. Thank you, everyone. That's the conclusion of our open session. Oh, sorry. Oh, Amy has a memorial. Sorry about that. You're up.
Thank you, President Walsh. I just wanted to add congratulations to Chancellor Jennifer Mnuchin and UW-Madison. Recently, I know Chancellor Mnuchin was in Denver to receive from the Association of Public Land Grant Universities an award, a designation as Innovation and Economic Prosperity University. And it's based on the university's significant, sustainable, and campus-wide commitment to economic engagement, including its past and future focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, technology transfer, talent and workforce development, and public service and community engagement. So congratulations.
Yes, congratulations to Madison and all right, we'll now move into closed session, and Regent Vice President Bogus, I would ask you to read the resolution.
I move the Board of Regents move into closed session to consider potential impending litigation in Ray College Athlete NIL litigation, blah, 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 as permitted by statute 19.85, parent 1, parent G of the Wisconsin statutes. Conduct public business with competitive and bargaining implications as permitted by statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider a request from UW-Madison to approve a salary range and to discuss search process and strategies permitted by section 1985, parent 1, parent C, and parent E of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider personal histories related to UW-Madison honorary degree nominations as permitted by section 1985, parent 1, parent F of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider review of a UW-Madison student disciplinary decision as permitted by section 19.85, parent 1, parent A, parent F, and parent G of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider a faculty member request for review of a UW staff personnel-related decision as permitted by section 1985, parent 1, parent F of the Wisconsin statute. Deliberate regarding a recommendation for dismissal with cause of a UW Stevens Point faculty member as permitted by section 1985, parent 1, parent A, and parent B of Wisconsin statutes. Discuss ongoing personnel matters as permitted by section 1985, parent 1, parent C, and parent F of Wisconsin statute. And consider search process and strategies for position at UW System Administration as permitted by section 1985, parent 1, parent C, and parent E of the Wisconsin statute.
Regents, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Regent President Walsh,
Yes.
Regent Vice President Bogus, Regent Adams, Regent Atwell, Regent Bechtel,
Yes.
Regent Cologne, Regent Jones, Regent Meneditz, Regent Miller,
Yes.
Regent Posh, Regent Peterson,
Yes.
Regent Rye,
Yes.
Regent Stetton,
Yes.
Regent Tucker,
Yes.
Regent Underly,
Yes.
Regent Locks,
Yes.
and Regent Weatherly.
Yes.
Okay, we'll pause now to clear the room and clear the lines.